He spent 30 years stuck as a weak, forgotten player, despite having one of the most broken abilities in existence, because his power lets him absorb magical artifacts by literally devouring them. But by the time he finally mastered it, he was already 55 years old, and far too late to become a hero. Then his constellation sends him back to the day his powers first awakened. Now, with future knowledge and unlimited growth potential, he starts consuming legendary artifacts before anyone else can touch them. This year, the main character Shin Sang-yeon will be 55 years old, but what is he even doing at his age? Others would have retired long ago. Right now, he was sitting in a cave, resting after a recent battle, but his opponents, the dragons, quickly found him. His life has turned out unsuccessfully. Why is he a loser? The dragons climbed into the cave and he stood up, indignant that they didn't even give him a chance to breathe, and then they pounced on him with a ferocious roar. Other players of his generation are already called Holy Sword, or God of Swordsmanship, or something else. But he's just an old man with a sword, or a swordsman with dementia. That's all he's recognizable for. Isn't that enough of a reason? He grew up in an orphanage without a family, and one day they were attacked by monsters. They captured his teacher. But even at death's door, she worried only about him until the very end, and told him not to fear for her but to run. She was killed right before his eyes, a sight that shocked him. Other children who had become his family also died from these monsters. When a rift appeared in the sky, these terrible creatures descended to the earth and took everything from him. But he did not fall into despair. The monster that killed his teacher was about to devour him, but a hero appeared and finished him off right there. When death was already breathing down his neck, a miracle happened. This hero turned to him with a smile and asked, "Is he okay?" MC could only cry. The hero saved him and he wanted to become like him, and he bet everything on it. Since his youth, all he did was kill monsters. No matter how many he killed, he never became strong and was unable to protect anything. He could not protect his friend. He died in his arms, and he screamed in despair. Having dealt with the monsters, Sang-yeon left the cave and leaned on his sword to rest. His old body was already failing him, and it was dangerous. A loud roar came from the sky, and he shuddered to see a huge dragon in front of him. It opened its mouth, gathering flames, and he grinned, laughing at his fate. A dream? There was none. He had no home, nor a family. His life had turned out unsuccessfully, and he couldn't stop regretting it. If only he could turn back time. By some miracle, he defeated this huge dragon and cleared the dungeon called the Ancient Dragon's Nest. He caught his breath and shouted indignantly, why was he straining himself so much when he was almost 60? 30 years had passed since he became a swordsman, but so far his best achievement was breaking into the top 100 in the country. Outside of Korea, he was essentially nobody, because there were so many great players in the world. Seeing a book nearby, he wondered if the reward this time was a skill book. He's eaten artifacts before. Can he eat this? A bright flash appeared from the side, and the system warned him. The constellation Late Blooming Scholar appeared. A guy jumped out of the resulting portal and said something in an unknown language, and the system kindly translated his words. Late Blooming Scholar thanked him for his hard work, and in addition, he rewarded him for a flawless finishing blow. The man who appeared so spectacularly was bound to him by a contract. He laughed and thanked him. He was glad he contacted him. After all, he was only a third-rate swordsman. Their contract gives him a special advantage. Once the player reaches level 850, all artifact and title stats will be doubled, and once they reach level 900, said stats will be tripled. He is currently level 650. Because of these insane conditions, he still hasn't received any benefit from becoming his companion. The system informed him that the Late Blooming Scholar was urging him to eat the book, and he smiled awkwardly, telling him that he was just about to do so. He reached out and used the artifact absorption ability on the book. This was the only skill he had obtained when he awakened. To understand his skill, he tried boiling his artifacts, tried roasting them before eating them, but there was little difference. By the time he finished his pointless experiments, 30 years had passed. When he uses mana synchronization on artifacts of the appropriate rank, it activates his artifact absorption skill. However, he realized this too late. The others were strong immediately after awakening. Nothing happened. He threw the book down in irritation and asked, shouldn't there be some instructions? It couldn't be a skill book. The system informed him that the Late Blooming Scholar claimed to know very little about this skill and apologized for not being able to help. However, he said that since they still had a lot of time, he should compromise once again and begin mana synchronization. These words angered him. He turned to him and shouted with tears in his eyes, who said that he still had much time. He is almost 60 years old. If he had a son at 30, he would be 30 now. And if he had a child even earlier, then maybe he would even have grandchildren by now. He may not know this because he is a constellation, but people die. The Late Blooming Scholar apologized if he said that this is not it, and he sighed heavily, saying that he did nothing wrong. It's just that his life is full of regrets. He still can't forget the back of that man. He tried so hard to become like him, but now he's just exhausted. He's too old. If only he were younger. The constellation thought about something, then smiled, and MC said that he is retiring. Let him write it down that way. Since he is breaking the contract with him, he should find another player. But the constellation decided to help him. He did something. Distorted reality. And this scene was the last thing he remembers, being 55 years old. The system informed him that the late-blooming scholar was disposing of the essence he was experimenting with. Time is turning back. Time passed. A reporter named Park Jungmin was now interviewing Han In-chun, the head of the Hunchun Corporation. He said that the dungeons and gates awakened people. In other words, players entered? She confirmed this. They can call the dungeon steps for players. What about the gates? They are other dimensions. In other words, they border on uncharted territories. These regions are places that players must explore and be pioneers. Sun Yun watched this interview on TV. He smiled and thought that he really turned back time. He hadn't watched this program for a long time. He is aware of the situation, but 4 days have passed and he is still confused. He went back 30 years. He lost consciousness, and when he woke up, he was in the studio apartment he'd lived in 30 years ago. He wasn't a 55-year-old man, but a young 25-year-old with all his memories intact. No matter how much he thought about it, the reason he'd returned to his past was the miracle of the constellation. He had no other explanation. He was still puzzled, but that didn't matter. He should get to work. He glanced at his weapon, the bronze-level Venomot dagger he'd been lucky enough to acquire during that time. The blade's rank might be low, but he knew its hidden ability. The absorption rate of a bronze-level artifact's basic stats was 10%. Plus a 10% bonus to its duration. The final stat absorption rate was 20%. Even though the absorption rate was slow, because he hadn't used it for a long time, the most important thing was its hidden ability. The system informed him that the process of synchronizing his mana with the dagger had begun, and the transition into the unconsciousness gap had begun. This is the space he needs to pass through to consume the artifact. And he's always so nervous when he comes here, because he doesn't know what kind of dish he'll get. This time, grilled chicken drizzled with olive oil appeared. He breathed a sigh of relief, glad that it was something normal. He was afraid that it would turn out like centipedes from a damp swamp. He could eat that kind of dish at any moment. As soon as he ate the whole chicken, the system informed him that his agility stat had increased by 2, and he had acquired the hidden skill, Demon Strike. The Venomot dagger, which was successfully absorbed, disappears forever. Returning from that space, MC patted his stomach and sighed heavily, thinking that it was a piti he no longer had the weapon. Not that he was planning to use it, but he still felt sorry. At least he had acquired a useful skill as he planned, so it was time for him to get ready. Sometime later, Yoon Dae-king's team gathered at the dungeon gate. The captain of the porter team ran up to him and said they had a new recruit. He had joined them 4 days ago, and his name was Sungyeon. Dae-king told him not to worry about him. It had been decided that he would join the player team. Hearing this, he became confused. Why was he joining the player team and not the porters? The captain said he had already signed the decree. Is there a problem? He indignantly exclaimed that he had only recently awakened and hadn't even graduated from the academy. He had never added someone like that to his team before. If he did this, the team would be unbalanced. How was he supposed to handle this? Dae-king approached him menacingly and asked if he wasn't keeping an eye on everything, his group, and the distribution of the contribution system. He laughed nervously and apologized, then left. The captain handed his assistant the list and said with displeasure that if the porters were given voting rights, they would immediately start to rebel. His assistant asked why he accepted it. He also thought it was irrational. He turned to him with a smile and asked, "Is he the same? If someone dies, it will be him, not them. He needs to die. Then those porters will finally shut up, and there will be fewer casualties among them. And what is a level 1 player capable of?" The guy smiled and noted that he had thought of that cleverly. He hadn't even realized it at first. At that moment, the MC approached them and greeted them, saying that from now on, he would be a player. The porters immediately glanced at him with displeased glances, and the players smirked. He felt uneasy under their stares, but he expected nothing less. But they were staring at him straight in the face. Dae-kyung greeted him with open arms and said with a smile that it was nice to meet him. He thought he would be late. He noticed his weapon and asked if he was carrying a longsword. He smiled awkwardly and said that he had watched a video on how to use it. The man noted that a longsword was one of the most difficult weapons to use on the battlefield, and he answered with a smile that he would at least try to defend himself, and that he should have faith in him. The captain laughed and threw an arm over his shoulder, saying that he had a fiery spirit, which was good. A man should be brave, just like him. After that, he returned to his team and said that they were starting the raid, and now they would have a lot of fun. The team members started to pass through the gate one by one, and the captain told someone to stand by at the exit as soon as he entered. The players were discussing how many monsters they would kill today, and when it was Sungyeon's turn to pass through the gate, the captain glanced at him and thought, did he watch the video? He must be a complete idiot. He doesn't understand what dungeons are at all. He's so arrogant just because he recently awakened and became a player. It seems he already has a dying wish. According to the raid strategy he developed, the orc dungeon is the last path for newbies. He will soon understand this himself. He called him an idiot, but when he saw him wield a sword, he was completely shocked. MC dealt with the orcs single-handedly. even defeated the dungeon boss, and now they didn't dare call him an idiot. Orcs are monsters that appear mainly in games, books, or fantasy films. Since they were so similar to them, it was expected that they would have their own prejudices against them, that orcs were weak. Of course, compared to other monsters, such as dragons, they are definitely weak, stupid, and cruel. Because of this, newbies who think too highly of themselves immediately rush into battle without thinking anything through. Orcs' characteristics are quite simple. Their average height is 250 centimeters, and their weight is 180 kilograms. Their physical strength is simply enormous. For this reason, sending a newbie into battle with the orcs means sending him one way. When they first entered the dungeons, one of the team members called out to Sangyeon and said that he would not be treated differently just because he was a newbie. The captain of the porter team spat in irritation and asked, "He just awakened and is already a player? He's just an arrogant idiot." The MC responded to this hazing with an awkward laugh, saying that he would try his best, and the man told him not just to try, but to actually do well. Of course he would try. He smirked and asked, then maybe he would fight on the front lines when they met the monster? The man turned to him and asked in confusion, was he crazy? His gaze also became fearful. An orc was following right behind them. Sangyeon was very excited because this was his first fight since returning to the past, but he was beaten to it. The man rushed towards the orc and blocked its attack with his shield, then called Sangyeon an idiot and asked, was he completely crazy? How was he going to use a sword when he was so slow? He told him that he didn't have to save him, and ordered him to stop talking and get down to business. The MC advised him to look at the monster in front of him, not at him, and he exclaimed, is this all the gratitude he gets? He turned to the orc, and at that moment, he pointed his axe at him. He was scared because he wouldn't be able to dodge, and then the team captain came to his aid. He hit the orc on the head with his shield, throwing him aside, and then yelled at the others, asking if they were on a date. Let them pull themselves together. The players admiringly noted that this was something special, and he swung his sword, ordering everyone to step back. He would take care of it himself. The orc growled menacingly and pounced on him, hitting him with his axe, but he blocked the blow and plunged the sword into his chest, exclaiming that it was nothing. The orc froze for a moment in pain. The players were already glad that he defeated him so easily, but the orc did not die. He pounced on the player again, swung his axe and hit with all his might, and he jumped back and clucked his tongue in irritation, saying that he almost killed him. Sangyeon watched this fight with boredom. Yoon Daekyung should be the highest level, but he was only level 50. So he couldn't do much damage to this monster. Daekyung charged back at the orcs, piercing them in the chest again with his sword, and this time, the blow killed them. His crewmates began to admire him, and he turned to them with a laugh, saying it was nothing. Are they okay? They happily confirmed it, saying it was all thanks to him. And just as they were about to move on, a loud cry rang out. An entire squad of red orcs was bearing down on them. Everyone, of course, became frightened and began asking the captain what the orders were, and he told them they should retreat for safety. He was worried himself. He barely defeated that orc, and these were even stronger. Sangyeon stepped forward and asked if he could give it a try. They were angered by his carelessness, and the captain replied that he knew he was glad he had awakened, but it was dangerous. MC didn't listen and rushed towards the monsters, and he shouted after him that he would simply die there. Immediately after that, MC swung his sword, killing the very first orc with just one blow. He noted that the long sword was quite good. It made a good cut. Seeing how he cut the orc, everyone was in complete shock. MC meanwhile threw the sword over his shoulder and thought with a smirk, is it because he is only level 1? He could have made a cleaner cut. The orcs growled in displeasure. They all pounced on him, and he said that he may be low level, but he has enough experience. After that, he dashed forward. Simultaneously swinging his sword, he struck all the orcs that were in his path, and at the very end, their commander met him. He quickly dodged his blow and, throwing back, asked if he had any idea how many of his kind he'd already killed. The players gaped in shock and asked, is that really Sangyeon? He could kill them all. Meanwhile, he reached the last monster, an armed orc. He pounced on him in response, swung his huge mace, and MC jumped, dodging the blow, and then spun around, wounding him in the neck, and jumped behind him. But the orc's skin was too thick, which made Daekyung nervous and shouted that the attacks wouldn't work. Things were bad. The orc swung his weapon. The sharp blade froze literally a couple of centimeters from Sangyeon's neck, and he smirked and told them not to panic. He used the skill Demon Strike, which paralyzed the monster. This is his hidden skill that interferes with the target, be it a monster or a human, for 0.2 seconds. He smiled and told the monster to stand still, causing it to scream in horror. Then MC struck and its head flew off, landing right at the players' feet. They were shocked by the sight. Didn't he just awaken 3 days ago? And this interference skill he used wasn't even an ultra-short interference. The best result was 1.5 seconds. Aren't you too experienced with a longsword? Maybe they should ask what video he watched on YouTube? The team captain was shocked. He thought it would work against an armed orc too, but he awakened a few days ago. Where did he get this skill? At that moment, the system congratulated Sangyeon on leveling up. he had fulfilled the conditions necessary to obtain a title. He was awarded the F-rank title, Fearless Immature Puppy. This title increases his evasion by 5. MC thought he didn't care about this level, but the name was cool. The system also told him he had unused bonus stat points, so he could choose which stats to increase. Right now, he only has 1 point available. He's already decided which stat to improve. He realized this too late in his past life, but the luck stat is directly related to artifact spawn rate, which is a necessity for him now. His luck increased, and the team captain approached him, asking if he was really a newbie. Was the skill he used really interference? Where did he get it? Sunyan wanted to tell him everything, how he lived to be 50, returned to his youth while retaining all the experience, but he couldn't. So he lied and said he got it upon awakening. Daekyun didn't believe him and started attacking him, asking if he was trying to trick him. Let him not avoid the answer. He was sure he couldn't have been so incredibly lucky that he even got a diamond-level artifact, or even higher. While he was saying this, he kept glancing at his sword, and MC handed him his weapon, asking if he wanted to check it out for himself. He coughed awkwardly, but still picked up the sword and found that it was an ordinary artifact, and exclaimed, "It really is an ordinary sword. Then are these all his skills?" He nervously gritted his teeth and thought that he had been exploring dungeons for 2 years, but even he didn't have such a great skill, even though he was level 50. At this rate, today's rewards would be completely gone. He was distracted from his thoughts by a squad member who said that the middle boss had awakened. The captain, with a gloomy expression on his face, told the others that they were going there, then turned to Sainyon and said that dealing with his assistants was easy thanks to him, but he shouldn't cross the line. His skill wouldn't do anything because they would soon be fighting an orc demon. MC smirked and realized he had almost forgotten the reason he joined this particular squad after returning to the past. He called out to the captain and asked if he killed the orc demon himself. Could he take the artifact that was given for killing it? The Crimson Stone is an artifact that can only be obtained by killing an orc demon. Even after defeating 100 of these orcs, it's difficult to obtain. The chances of it dropping are negligible. However, in their past life, their team failed to defeat the orc and was lucky enough to see a crimson stone, while the other team was lucky enough to snag it. While they were healing their wounds at the entrance to the dungeon, he saw the leader of that team, who was very happy with his catch. His subordinates crowded around him, asking how he managed to get it. They would be able to sell it for a lot of money. Isn't this the only artifact with a delay skill? Sangyeon was interested in this, since he desperately needed this skill. Currently, he said that if he remembered correctly, this team paid proportionally to the contribution, so if he personally defeated the monster, he thought there would be no problem with the reward distribution. Daekyun remained silent, and he thought that if he obtained a delay skill now, it would be very useful to him in the future. However, most players would think badly of newbies playing so brazenly. No one would take him seriously. 2 guys approached him and asked him irritably, "Is he crazy? Who does he even think he is? Does he think he's super cool because he killed a couple of orcs?" He asked them to calm down, and when the captain told him to do what he wanted, they both called out to him in surprise, and he said that he could only do that if they failed to defeat the boss. Only under that condition could he go to the dungeon and kill it himself. It turned out to be easier than MC thought. And he asked, "Does that mean he doesn't participate in this battle?" The captain headed to the boss's room and confirmed it, after which he irritably thought that he was just an insolent brat. He only had 1 normal skill, and he was already so proud. He would make sure they cleared the dungeon, and he was left without a reward. Let him see that on the battlefield, experience is what matters most. Opening the doors to the middle boss room, he saw an ominous orc inside, the same stone hanging on his chest. He took out his weapon and ordered everyone to get ready, and thought that he looked intimidating, but he heard that he was easy to defeat. He told the team to surround and attack him from behind, after which he smirked and thought, isn't he a team player? He was sorry, but there are no solo players in a team. He rushed forward, saying that he would take on the monster, and then something happened. He woke up already on the floor, covered in wounds. He got up, asking what happened, and Sangyeon, standing next to him, thought that he got scared when they started running. Who would have thought that they would attack him? They also lost last time, when the team had already received a couple of hits from the monster. The guy called out to the captain and asked what they should do. They would die so easily. Daekyun glanced at his opponent and thought that both the previous orc and this one were strong. That's why he shouldn't listen to advice from the market. He told everyone to retreat. There was no need to defeat him today. And then, he caught sight of Sangyeon, who was smiling brightly at him. This made them angry, but the captain exclaimed that none of that mattered. Everyone needed to retreat. Since his peripheral vision was poor, they would do it from the flank. They sighed with relief, and the captain approached Sangyeon and said that he had warned him, so he shouldn't be angry with him when he died. He grinned back, took his sword, and told him not to worry about him. He definitely wouldn't die today. After that, the orc charged straight at him, and he prepared himself. If they only compared stats, he had no chance against the orc. However, he had experience from his past life, and he would use it. He swung his sword, parrying the blow, and the orc growled in displeasure. Hearing the resounding clang, The party members were surprised he'd managed to block his axe. MC waved his hand as the full force of the recoil hit him, saying that it seemed like dodging his attacks was all he could do. He glanced at the crimson stone and thought, it's been a while. The reason he's so obsessed with this artifact is the special effect of combining the skill delay with his own skill, Demon Strike. It's hard to see how the 2-second stun that Demon Strike currently has could be improved, considering it's quite decent. However, as a wielder of the artifact Devouring skill, he can combine the effects of various skills, which gives him one idea. What if there was a skill that allowed him to stack the stun effects of Demon Strike? That would be the perfect combination of skills, giving him an infinite stun. If he can get the delay skill, it's more than possible. He told the orc to attack, but the orc only growled and immediately pounced on him. He praised him for his obedience and, wounding his side, said that this way he would be able to discover his weak points. Because of the pain in his side, the orc immediately dropped his axe, and then the Demon Strike skill activated, stunning him for 2 seconds. The captain was surprised that this skill also works on mid-bosses, and Sangyeon said that he knew that regular orcs are stupid, but he is a demon orc. Something he didn't expect happened. The orc broke out of the stun early and immediately kicked him, but he managed to react and block the blow, although he was thrown back. He realized that he had forgotten something. He has a regenerative ability, which removed the stun effect early. It must take 15 seconds before he can stun him again. That's why he wants the delay effect so much. If he can't stun him, then he will have to win. The orc rushed forward with a furious cry, swinging his axe, but this time MC dodged and said that his attacks looked easy. The squad, meanwhile, stood to the side and watched the fight. One of them approached the captain and said that they should retreat. Even this idiot can't handle it. But the captain was currently absorbed in his thoughts. His stun skill doesn't work. The difference in stats is huge. So why is he smirking like that? Is he really a newbie? Sangyeon said that it was time for him to finish already. He had been through this in the past. If you are weaker than the enemy, then it is better to focus all your efforts on one thing. Forget about cutting the enemy. Instead, you can use their strength against them to pierce the enemy. The moment the monster pounced on him, he grinned and pierced its body with his sword, after which the system congratulated him on defeating the mid-boss. His level increased several times, and he received a new title, Rank E, Demon Hunter. When facing mid-level bosses and above, his health regeneration increases 5-fold. He thought he already had 2 titles. Perhaps that was a plus for not being a team player. He wanted to check his status window, but saw the squad approaching him, stunned by his victory, and thought that to avoid awkward situations like this, one solution came to mind. He sighed heavily and exclaimed that he almost died. What would he do without their captain, who dealt all the damage? The guy chuckled and told the captain that he knew it. And when did he even have time to do that? Daekyung didn't understand what they were talking about and glanced at Sangyeon, who, with just his expression, was asking him, he's not that stupid, is he? He's giving him a chance not to lose his honor. He looked at the stone that fell from the monster and thought, is he just telling him to keep his word? He chuckled and quietly whispered that this was his complete defeat, then turned to the team and said that now that they had defeated the mid-boss, they should be ready for the final one. They continued discussing the recent battle, and MC, glancing at the artifact, thought that now that there were no witnesses, he should absorb it. The Crimson Stone is a silver artifact that, in addition to the special effect, adds 10 points to health and strength. He entered a period of unconsciousness, this time offered a Korean dish consisting of cold noodles made from assorted meat and vegetables. He was overjoyed at his luck with delicious dishes and began eating. The system informed him that absorption was in progress. In accordance with the 20% absorption rate of silver rank basic stats, his strength and health stats were increased by 2 points. He gained the special effect delay. Now he can add it to his skills. He opened the system window, wondering why he was so worried, and applied the delay effect to Demon Strike. Now, if he uses Demon Strike before the first stun ends, he can guarantee a transition to a second stun. The third use has a 90% chance, the fourth a 60% chance, and the fifth in a row a 30% chance to prolong the stun. Immediately after that, he returned from unconsciousness and checked the status window. Now he has a guaranteed 4-second stun. Purely theoretically, this is possible, but can it actually work? While he was rejoicing at this, the team captain approached him and asked if they could talk. They would soon reach the final boss room. He didn't let him finish and asked if he wanted him to join. He told him that he didn't. He wouldn't be a leader if someone like him was in his party. He extended his hand and suggested that they work together, and Sangyeon returned the gesture, smiling and saying that his demands were the same. He agreed without any problem, after which one of the squad members approached them and informed the captain that they were ready. Daekyung said that if that's the case, then they should move on, and that everyone should be on guard. Because he caught them right in the middle of shaking hands, this guy glared angrily at Sangyeon, which made him feel a little uneasy. The team captain left with him, offering the others a drink after their final battle, and MC wondered why he looked at him like that. They reached the final boss room, where an orc berserker was waiting for them. Sensing the presence of the players, he immediately began to rise, and Daekyung nervously told Sangyeon that he would go first, but he stepped forward and told them to just stay close to him. After that, he took a deep breath and thought that orc berserkers have a lower resistance level than demons, so stunning him should be easier. If he calmly attacks him, then there should be no problems. He rushed to attack, and a huge orc ran towards him. At that moment, he thought, why did he tell them to stay close to him? Had he ever been confident in himself before? When he was younger, he was simply afraid of everything, and with age, he tried to survive. He cannot be the same. He must completely change himself so as not to repeat the same mistakes and come to a better future. And to do this, he must show and prove to everyone here what he is capable of. He parried the enemy's blow, and he pounced on him again. Then he gathered more strength and struck a blow that made the captain smile nervously and asked what kind of monster he was. His blow cut the monster's shoulder. Immediately after that, he shouted to the team that he would be stunned for 4 seconds. Let them attack. Daekyun gave the order, and they all ran towards the orc. He couldn't do anything to them, so they dealt him multiple blows, finishing him off with their combined efforts. They thus successfully cleared the dungeon. Looking at the orc's body, one of the team members asked, wasn't that too easy? He hadn't even drunk a single potion. His comrade agreed, noting how stunning made everything easier, and MC heard the porter's conversation behind him. The team captain asked his comrade if he thought he'd already been assigned a personal porter. Should they ask about it? He exclaimed that he'd actually thought of it first. He'd be his porter. They started arguing about it, and Sonyeon smiled nervously, thinking that they'd changed their minds so quickly. He'd actually been reluctant to do anything for them. His level was raised, and he was also given the D-rank title of Player with Unrivaled Strength, which increases the duration of effects by 10%. He smiled and thought that titles were simply raining down on him today. He had never been given these in his past life. However, it was still not enough for someone like him. Kyungsu is a ghost blade, a collector, and the ultimate sword. He is the strongest swordsman in Korea and has many titles. Just 2 years after the advent of the player era, he had already reached level 500. He was his idol before he went to the past, but now he could very well catch up with him if he worked harder. Noticing how he was clenching his fists and breathing heavily, the captain asked what he was doing. He awkwardly replied that he was just warming up, and he, handing him an item, said that he had done a good job. Here is his reward. He was very surprised by his gesture and asked what had come over him. He answered him with a smile that he really worked hard this time, and he knows how to be grateful. It's only a bronze level, so he can be generous. He smiled awkwardly and asked if he was being too honest. Daekyung smiled and said that if it were something expensive, he would keep it for himself, and added in his thoughts that he was giving it to him because they would not see each other again. He even felt a little sad, but he himself understood that it was for the best. He, unlike them, was in a different world. Of course, there was someone who was envious of Sonyeon, almost to the point of rage. That guy nervously clenched his teeth and thought, is he paying more attention to him because this clown bragged about his skills a couple of times? He had been his right hand for so long. This was all unfair. He took out his phone, wishing death on both of them, and called someone. Time passed. The MC returned home and immediately began to rejoice in his reward. He now had 6 million in his account. Porters earn much less. It seemed the captain had given him more than twice as much as the others, and he also had an extra bonus. Daekyung had given him the Berserker Ring, a bronze artifact that adds 10 points to strength and grants a special effect called Lightweight. He thought that even if it was bronze level, getting Lightweight for free was a great success. Lightweight spends 1 mana every second to reduce the weight of artifacts. Now, he understood why it was only bronze level. Most players would have run out of mana before they could even lift a sword. But still, that applies to most players, not everyone. He only realized his ability after he was 50, but that's precisely why he learned all its intricacies. In his past life, he had also used an artifact that required mana, and the results had surprised him. The artifact's special effect, which requires constant mana expenditure, will suffer a penalty, but this will permanently remove the mana cost. He started the process of synchronizing mana with the Berserker Ring, and thought, what difference does it make if there is a penalty? The more skills, the better. Meanwhile, in a closed club in the Gangnam district, that same guy, Daekyung's right-hand man, was currently having fun. He exclaimed that he was not lying. That idiot really did have a 4-second stun. The man he was talking to immediately restrained him, so he would not raise his voice, and asked, so what? He wants them to avenge him? He answered that that was not true. He was definitely well off. He must have used some artifact related to stun. The man was already losing patience and asked what he wanted from him. He answered that he was offering him business, cooperation, and that he was also Daekyung's favorite. Another man, their boss named Juntae, remarked that he wanted revenge, and the girls sitting next to him whispered in his ear, aren't they close? He looks like a loser. He called out to the guy and for some reason slashed his sword across his ear, and then asked who he took them for. Did he think they were his personal servants? He poured alcohol directly onto the wound and said that money would come first, and his ear would be payment. And where should they look for that guy? Time passed. Sanyeon spent the whole morning on the training ground and finally sat down to rest. He remembered what he was offered to eat when he absorbed the ring. Who would have thought that cold cucumber soup would appear that would kill anyone who tasted it? His stomach still felt uneasy, but everything has its advantages. He tossed the sword, spinning it in the air, and caught it with ease, because now it was much lighter. Due to the artifact devouring skills effect, the old skill's mana consumption effect was removed, and as a penalty, the lightweight effect was halved. Now, all artifacts weigh only 100 grams, but this also had its downsides. MC was afraid he'd accidentally let it go, and decided to stick with a two-handed sword for now. The next thing he checked was his status window. Looking at his stats, he thought he needed a constellation. Since a player can only have one constellation, he needed to think carefully about it. If he could choose, he'd pick someone who was a good match for his best stat, luck. But right now, he lacks the stats to attract anyone's attention, so all he can do is train. Time passed, he drove to the forest by car, and finally got up from the seat, stretched, and said that he thought he was going to die. 3 days of hard training and long-distance driving were too much, but at least he had acquired a new skill. He had been practicing dual-wielding a sword all this time, which increases his adaptability to all types of swords, except daggers and one-handed longswords. He glanced at the huge portal in front of him and thought that it would take him months to wait to enter a single-player dungeon. He should be happy that he could even reach one. And then he noticed a suspicious car nearby and wondered who would follow him through the forest. He didn't know what they wanted, but whatever it was, he could deal with it in the dungeon. After that, he walked through the gate, followed by those idiots. Sanyeon was waiting for them as soon as they appeared, asking if this wasn't a single-player dungeon. Juntae looked at him and said that there was no way they were in the wrong dungeon. He was the first one to enter here. They called him an idiot, and he grabbed his sword, saying that he wouldn't report them, so they should just leave. He thought their team was unusual. They didn't have a healer or a mage. They abandoned the durability necessary for clearing a dungeon and formed a squad consisting exclusively of attackers, swordsmen, and an archer. They are a squad that hunts people like a pack of hyenas. These guys laughed at him, saying that he thinks he's tough. If he dies here, he won't have a chance to recover. The MC smirked and told them that he was aware of this and thought that they had been wiped out in the past, thanks to the constant surveillance of the Players Association. In such groups, the hardest to deal with are the archers. The archer prepared himself and suggested that they finish this quickly, and Sanyeon said that's why he was waiting for them all. When he needs to dispose of these bodies, this will be the most suitable place. The biggest man got angry and went towards him, shouting all sorts of curses, but his boss stopped him and said that they would take the easy way out. He looked at him with irritation and asked, "Is this the easy way out?" He would rip out his tongue and feed it to him already. The MC called him a good dog. Let him continue to obey his master. Let them not waste his time and attack all at once. The man smirked and said that he better shut his mouth, and then pounced on him in rage. Sanyeon, full of confidence, was waiting for his moment to attack. Survival of the strongest. What expression suits dungeons better than this? Monsters always want to kill you in dungeons, and if not them, then people. Someone always wants to kill you. If you are weak, you will die. There are no rules when you are inside a dungeon, so either you kill or you will be killed. He had exactly this experience in his past life, and it also applies to a younger age. As a result, everything that happens here is just self-defense. He quickly dealt with that man with his attack and looked up at the others, asking why they were standing there. They wanted to attack him, but they didn't attack, running past him to take more advantageous positions. Junta ordered everyone to keep their distance and ordered the archer to cover them. He answered that he understood everything and thought, did he kill Sanho? Even if he is an idiot, he still managed to reach level 100. He also recently awakened. MC swung his sword, asking where they were going, and the archer fired a couple of arrows at him, shouting that he was a monster. He swung his sword, cutting through his arrows, and immediately headed towards him, and he exclaimed in shock that this was just madness. In the end, he suffered the same fate as Sanho. Juntae turned to him in shock, thinking, did he just throw his sword at him? But that also meant he was unarmed. The perfect moment to attack. Noticing Sanyeon running toward his sword, he turned around and signaled to his comrade. They all ran toward the archer's body. MC almost grabbed the sword, but at that moment, the two attacked him and a loud crash was heard. But contrary to their expectations, they didn't even manage to touch him. To dodge this attack, Sanyeon, leaning on his sword, stood on one hand and said that it was close. The guy called him crazy. Then MC pulled the sword out of their comrade's body, and Juntae, seeing no other choice, grabbed the guy by the head and held it in front of him like a shield. Sanyeon's sword slashed across his body and grazed Juntae's fingers. After that, he stepped on him and asked, they sell human organs too, right? They're not together because they trust each other or anything. Is their goal to collect mana stones through organ transplants? You can't tell by his appearance, but he's seen a lot. The man laughed and asked what difference it made if he knew something. He lunged at him, aiming the blade straight at his face, but froze without landing a blow. MC said with a smile that he was actually just asking, afraid he'd die of boredom with him. He froze because his demon strike skill activated, and now he's stunned for 4.4 seconds. Juntae was panicking. He couldn't move, and he thought, why was he stunned? How did this happen? They were just scratches. What kind of skill does he have? Sanyeon walked towards him threateningly, saying it's over, and he nervously thought, what is he talking about? Is he really going to die like this? There's no way that's going to happen. He is the one who kills, not the one who is killed, and it has always been like this. Once, a naive newbie fell victim to them, so they didn't kill him right away. They began to mock him, cutting off his limbs. He was always a predator. MC asked if he himself hadn't been in a similar situation. He was scared, because he was now the one who was driven into a corner. After finishing with him, Sanyeon went to the river to wash his sword. He sighed heavily and said that he shouldn't get used to this. After all, he only recently became younger. It seems that now he has no chance of making a contract with the constellation, but it was self-defense. He decided not to dwell on it and, looking at the weapons that were left of these guys, thought, does this mean this is all his? After that, he changed his clothes and looked at his stats. Increased after eating artifacts. He smiled and thought that he wished he had avoided this situation, but looking at the results, it was worth it. He's glad he didn't gain weight from eating. Based purely on his stats, he's as strong as level 50 players. How long has it been since he was rejuvenated? He's growing exponentially. He also received a Ring of Restoration, a silver artifact. It can use 10 mana to immediately negate any effects. Reusing it for the next minute doubles the mana consumption. The guy who attacked him first was wearing this ring. This means that if he had relied solely on the stun, things would have turned out badly. He needs to be more careful next time. After that, he started synchronizing his mana with the Ring of Restoration and entered a period of unconsciousness. It was finally time to fight the monsters, so he went to the inner underground road. Goblins were wandering around there right now, carrying some things, and they noticed a blindfolded man slowly following them. He took a deep breath and thought this was crazy. The requirements for earning the Lucky Day title were roughly as follows. A player had to kill 500 monsters with their eyes closed. The goblins were confused because he didn't attack them, and when they saw his shiny sword, they started drooling and wanted to take it from him. MC kept wondering when they would attack him. He could feel their presence. He needed to feel the airflow and listen carefully to everything. He concentrated. All the background noise died down, and he heard only footsteps around him. He convinced himself that he would succeed, and when one of the goblins attacked him, he immediately countered the attack and swung his sword in a semicircle, thereby dealing with all the monsters in one blow. He smirked and noted that this was a good start, but the fight was not over yet. An arrow flew at him from the side. He deftly caught it and broke it, which left the goblin archer perplexed. Sangyeon approached him and said that he had recently found himself in a difficult situation, but thanks to it, he was able to indulge in memories of the past, which ultimately helped him sharpen his senses. He saw that the archer was not alone and ordered them all to attack. A huge horde of monsters immediately rushed towards him, and he met them with swift sword swings. Looking at this bloody mess, the goblin who was behind everyone was terrified. After some time, MC finally finished them off. His level increased, and he received the new title, Lucky Day. He immediately removed his blindfold and thought that he felt like he had accomplished a lot. Lucky Day is a title that adds 20 points to luck. Each time he defeats the same type of monster, his luck stat will be increased by 0.1. The luck stat can increase by a maximum of 10. He laughed contentedly, noting that slowly but surely he was getting the titles he needed, and at that very moment, goblins entered the mine, unaware of what had happened there. Seeing a pile of their dead brethren, they were terrified, and Sanyeon turned to them, wondering why he shouldn't use this as a chance to earn extra points. They had come for him after all. After that, he checked his status window and laughed out loud, because his luck stat had increased by 30 points just thanks to this title. It's worth 500 million, even thousands. In this life, he will be able to afford to buy a house. While he was dreaming about this, a rift appeared behind him, and the system warned him that his surroundings were starting to blur. He turned around in surprise and thought, so fast? The system said that 3 constellations were offering him a contract. The cleaner of the fallen dimension asks if he has any interest in making others unhappy. The pilgrim of the great cosmos is intrigued by his mystery and asks for permission to negotiate. The goddess of fortune smiles at him and extends her hand. The MC is very happy. It happened quickly, and there are 3 of them. He asks if they liked his show, and the goddess of fortune suddenly approaches him, making him nervous and wondering if he was being too bold. He's not sure, since this never happened in his past life. The constellation smiles at him. The goddess of fortune is interested in him because she's never seen a lucky swordsman before. He smiles awkwardly and says that he's been told before that he's lucky, and then thinks it's such a relief. It seems all 3 constellations want to make a contract with him. Why shouldn't he use his time and see for himself? The system says the purifier of the fallen dimension blesses him for his hidden cruelty. Sanyeon thinks this constellation is often found among those who kill a lot. He was interested in him because he had killed many goblins in a short period of time. He glanced at the pilgrim constellation of the great cosmos and thought that he didn't even know why he had appeared. He probably only appeared to those who had a chance to become a saint. If that was the case, could he assume that he had appeared because of the goddess of fortune? He had heard that she was popular even among other constellations. Noticing his gaze, the goddess of fortune said that she had no exclusive wishes. Even if he chose a different constellation, he would be able to contact her later. He smiled nervously and realized that he had almost forgotten. This was an incredible achievement. An archer who could hit his target even if he was shooting into empty space. Thanks to the blessings of this world, he didn't have to worry about running out of arrows. He was called the Archer of Miracles, Hashimoto Yuki. He was worthy of the highest praise among archers, given his destructive power and high luck stat. Even though the stories of his deeds were simply lies or hoaxes, in reality, it was all thanks to the contract with his 2 constellations. One of those who made the impossible possible was the goddess of luck. He awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that 3 constellations suddenly appeared before him like this. He needed to think it over. The system informed him that the constellations insisted that he ignore his worries and decide his own destiny. One constellation claimed that it may have made the wrong decision. MC couldn't believe these constellations. The goddess of luck is simply a wonderful constellation, there's no doubt about it. But if he considered the possibility that the other constellations wouldn't consider him, his choice now would determine his fate as a player. In his past life, after 10 years had passed since he became a player, only one constellation contacted him. A late-blooming scholar, its appearance was like a ray of saving grace for him. He was ecstatic. Even though his life had been miserable up until then, he thought he had a bright future ahead of him. However, nothing changed until he turned 55, and he didn't know how much help a constellation could give. It's all because of those ridiculous level requirements. Although the power of constellations is important in a player's career, he was never able to take advantage of it. Actually, he didn't even bother with it. Well, in the end, it was with its help that he was able to return to the past, so he should be grateful. However, this also means he should be careful. He should assume that he definitely won't be allowed to live his life a 3rd time. Holy powers, destruction, and luck? Which will he choose? Of course, he signed a contract with the goddess of fortune, and the system informed him that if the player died, the contract with the constellation would be valid for 30 years. A being from another dimension watched him and the goddess of fortune closely as they signed the contract. 15 friendly constellations congratulated him and wished him the best. 3 hostile constellations who planned to make a contract with him declared they would do everything to hinder his progress. He smiled nervously and asked why so many of them were interested in him, but none of that mattered. He extended his hand to the goddess of fortune and wished them both good luck. She returned his gesture and praised his wise decision. He wanted to say something, but the system prevented him from doing so, informing him of the effects of the contract with the goddess of fortune. All attack attempts will result in a critical hit. Obtaining an artifact with a unique rank or higher will unlock a hidden effect. He has a 100% chance of receiving an artifact from mid-boss and boss monsters, even if they are low-ranked. He was greatly surprised by such good effects, and the goddess of fortune smiled proudly. But that was not the end. If he uses the points he receives when leveling up, he can double his stats with just 1 point if he relies on luck. This effect will be applied to all bonus points that have already been used. As he read the description of each effect, he cried with happiness. And then the goddess turned to the other constellations and asked what he would do with their suggestions. He said that everything was fine, they could return. For now, he was completely focused on his goddess. The constellations were surprised by his words, and the pilgrim of the great cosmos said he would look forward to their next meeting, and the purifier of the fallen dimension warned him that he would do everything to remove his head from his shoulders. After that, they left, and the goddess of fortune praised Sangyeon for firmly standing by his decision. He laughed and remarked that she seemed to be in a good mood. With effects like those from the goddess of fortune, he no longer needed to worry about upcoming battles. He needed to calm down. His chance would come again. After that, he went to the final boss room, and while he fought him, the goddess of fortune watched him from the side with concern. MC pounced on the monster, asking, "Is that all he can do? Let him try a little harder." The goblin lord blocked his attack and growled, then swung his weapon, knocking it away, and used some skill. The system immediately notified him that the Goblin Lord had afflicted him with a status ailment, depression. But he was only too glad, because he would be able to obtain this ability if he won. Although it is not as deadly as stun, it can forcibly lower the target's motivation to fight. He used his Recovery Ring's ability to remove the status effect, and the goblin immediately attacked him, surprising him when he dodged it. Sangyeon said that even though this skill has a clear limitation, it can't completely stop the target's movement. This would be useful when fighting weaker monsters. He looked up at him with a smirk and said that it was time to try his luck. The monster was afraid that his skill was no longer working. Immediately after, he received a strong blow from Sangyeon, and he asked, did he really think that would work? The Demon Strike skill activated, stunning the Goblin Lord for 2 seconds. MC took full advantage of this time to land numerous blows, then activated the delay effect, extending the stun for another 2 seconds. The monster growled pitifully and attempted to attack back but was unable to, so Sangyeon struck, extending the stun again. He approached the goblin, happy that he had succeeded this time, and delivered the finishing blow. Finally, the monster fell, and the system congratulated him on clearing the Dark Goblin Swamp dungeon. His level was increased, and he received a new D-rank title, Don't Touch Me. With a sigh of relief, MC fell to his knees and exclaimed that it was finally over. The new title increases luck by 30 and evasion by 10. It can enhance a specific skill once, with the increase occurring according to a coefficient calculated for the player's system. Sangyeon was very exhausted, as he had had a busy day today, from a life-or-death fight with those bandits to clearing a dungeon. And why was he torturing himself like this? The goddess of luck said that for such bad luck, there must be something more than just a bad streak. He asked from that perspective, isn't it fair to call luck a skill? She told him that luck is a skill, and she was glad he had it. He noted how easily she changed her mind, and she smugly said it was all thanks to her. He ignored her and opened the system window, deciding to distribute the bonus points first. As a result, his luck stat had already exceeded 100, meaning a correction was in effect, increasing the related effects by 10%. For example, evasion affects evasion speed, while luck affects artifact drop rates. All that remained of the monster was his shield, a silver artifact with a special sacrifice effect and 20 defense. This shield increases its power with mana and converts incoming damage into health, but all processes consume mana in exchange for the equivalent amount. MC said that thanks to the goddess, this effect is always guaranteed. Luck affects artifact drop rates, but one thing is certain. It's more beneficial than the effects of late-blooming Scholar. He reached for the shield and initiated the mana synchronization process, and the goddess of luck joyfully embraced him. After that, he went to the quest area, but they refused him. He told the worker that he understood what she wanted to tell him, but he had his own reasons. She asked if he could think again. She was going crazy here too. She had already lost count of how many dead people she had seen this week. He nervously clenched his teeth and thought that things couldn't go like this. 2 hours ago, he left the forest where the dungeon was located and entered the expressway. While he was driving, he thought about what he ate. He was worried that the food would be bad because it was a goblin shield, but luckily, it turned out to be rice with kimchi. Suddenly, his car began to creak and shake, and all the possible warning signs appeared on the dashboard. This made him nervous, and he thought maybe he should change the car? But getting there now is more important than changing the car. The lower the player's level, the more crimes, and he doesn't want to live with anxiety, so moving to more protected places, like the player town, would be a suitable solution. He should also consider buying used artifacts and devouring them. And then he realized he needed money, a lot of it. There was only one place where he could get that much. The system that came with the player era, the quests that came with it, and the organization that gives out those quests is called the Player Association, and that's why he headed straight there, but he was turned away at the entrance. Currently, an association worker told him that he needed to enter dungeons appropriate for his level. Why would he enter a level 100 zone? He didn't even have a rank. He swore to her that he wouldn't cause any problems, and thought that he might be level 17, but his skills were so great that it would be a shame to waste them on a low-level dungeon. The girl burst into tears and said that she'd heard such speeches before, and there was no need to guess what happened next. Let him enter the zones that were appropriate for him. Sangyeon understood why the workers were like that. There were too many players who overestimated their abilities. But in times like these, you have to push through. He continued to stand his ground, and then a player approached them, asking what was wrong. The association worker excitedly told her that everything was fine. It was Kim Miso, a level 100 A-rank player from the Eden Guild. MC was very surprised when he saw her, because she was a pious archer of massacre. She is the first level 100 player to reach rank A+, a rising star. Besides her skills, she stands out because she is the daughter of Kim Yoon-chul, the chairman of Sacred Biotechnology. This means she is also known by the alias Shadow Assassin. After Shadow Assassin, the best assassin in the country, the best swordsman in Korea is Cho Jin-ho. She is the daughter of the chairman of the company that owns the largest share in the Eden Guild. She can be called the most crooked player in history. Miso approached him and asked if they were meeting for the first time. She had been watching him for a while. Why does he need a level 100 quest? He told her that it was all because there was a lot of money to be had for it, and the players standing nearby were very surprised that she had even spoken to someone and started gossiping about Sangyeon, calling him an idiot. The girl said that it was very hard, and he told her that he knew, but the higher the risk, the higher the reward. He thought that he was definitely not doing this for personal reasons. In his past life, Kim Miso had refused his request to join her guild. It was absolutely not because he held a grudge against her. She asked, he knows, right? That completing quests alone is prohibited by the Players Association. And then he realized that he had completely forgotten about it. These rules would only change in 4 years. He laughed awkwardly and hurried away, saying that he hadn't seen it. But the girl had already shown interest and invited him to complete the quest with her, which surprised him. The other players exclaimed, "Are you crazy? Why with this idiot?" They could have participated too. They became jealous of him, and he wondered what she was even up to. He inquired about the conditions, and she asked if he didn't believe it was just a favor. He laughed awkwardly, telling her that life had taught him not to trust people, and she said there were no conditions. It was more like help, but if his skills are worse than he says, he will pay for it. Of course, if his confidence is directly proportional to his abilities, she will offer her sincere apologies. He smirked and thought, so she was daring him? Kim Miso's influence goes beyond just being a famous player. The value of the clothing brand she inflicts skyrockets. Dozens of articles are published based on her words alone. The moment she calls someone simply an overconfident player, his career immediately ends. But he was not afraid and confidently said that then they would go on the quest right then and there. It would be fun. Some time ago, Miso arrived at the association and thought that all the guild members had busy schedules, so she needed to find someone to go on a quest with, but it would be difficult. By coincidence, she had a reason to go with Sangyeon. The minimum number of participants for the quest was also a burden to her, but she found a confident player. But she had no idea what he was really capable of. So she herself was also very curious. She approached an association worker, asking what quest he wanted to go on, and she excitedly showed her everything. A defense quest requires destroying all the monsters heading towards the defense tower. If the tower's core is destroyed, the quest will fail. There will only be 300 wolf-type monsters there. The quest requires level 100, and the reward is 500 million won. She was surprised that it wasn't gathering or hunting, but a defense quest. These types of quests require defeating every monster to complete. There's a rule. In a group of 4, there must always be at least one player who can deal ranged damage. But he wanted to do this quest alone. If it weren't for her, he would have died alone. Noticing her hesitation, he mockingly asked, "Is she afraid?" She thought she must have misheard him, and he said, she suddenly became quiet, which made him think she was scared. If this was too difficult for her, they could wait for more players, like someone who deals ranged damage or a tank. He wanted to suggest another option, but she immediately grabbed his hand and pressed the accept button, irritably telling him she wasn't afraid. After that, the two of them were immediately transported to the quest area, and the association worker worriedly thought, since she was going with him, nothing bad could happen, right? Anything could happen there. The other players asked, dumbfounded, does this guy really think he has a chance? That simply can't be true. He's level 17, and the monsters there are for hundreds. His friend asked, why did Kim Miso even go with him? She has a reputation as the youngest A+ player. The guy asked, he knows about the new ranking system introduced by the Players Association, right? It was introduced because judging a player's strength solely by level wouldn't be entirely accurate. Now, 2 stats are taken into account. The first is the number of dungeons cleared, and the second is an overall assessment of the player's combat sense. But this means that Kim Miso is an A+ player solely because of her combat sense. But then the question arises, why A+ and not just A? It's obvious, because there is someone better than her, but now none of that matters. He went with Kim Miso herself. Of course, those guys became jealous of him. Time passed, and the two were already in the quest area and had time to prepare. Night had fallen, which meant wolves would soon attack. Miso stood on the roof of the building and watched Sangyeon wandering below. She thought that words had weight. If things got bad, she would certainly help him. When she saw his smirk, she hoped that this quest would bring him back to Earth. 30 minutes earlier, he had told her not to interfere unless he called her. If she only helped, he would give her 5%. She asked, so she heard correctly? He confirmed it. 5% just for helping out sounds good. She said that the conditions didn't bother her. It was obvious he couldn't handle it on his own. There would be at least 300 monsters. She was only level 100, but even she would have a hard time doing this alone. Seeing his expression, she was surprised. He smirked and told her to just watch. Now, she sighed heavily and said that then, with each monster he missed, his share would decrease by 1%. If he missed 95, he would get nothing. Does he understand that? At that very moment, wolves appeared. They growled menacingly, and MC prepared for battle, answering the girl that he agreed to this, because this would not happen, because he would not miss anyone. The fight began. The wolves pounced on him, and he swung his sword several times, killing them all, after which he stepped aside and said with a smirk that they were queued up close, but she would not know it. Meanwhile, she realized that he was confident for a reason. That blow was flawless. A stance that fully utilizes the reach of a two-handed sword. It was the perfect pose. Exactly what the swordsman in her guild, Jinho, always talked about. Offense and defense as one. Moreover, he minimized unnecessary movements, killing several enemies with one blow. But even for such confidence, there were too many monsters. After all, a level 17 player couldn't handle that many. The monsters surrounded him from all sides, but despite this, he rushed into battle with a smirk, and then the girl noticed something strange. Why weren't the monsters moving? She quickly realized that he had used a stun skill on them, and she almost fell off the roof in surprise. She quickly regained her balance and thought that it was dangerous, but it doesn't matter. Was that just a stun? She counted down 4 seconds, which means his stun lasts even longer than Jinho's. He can easily inflict status effects and destroy monsters. Who the hell is he? Sangyeon killed a couple more monsters at this time and noticed something strange. One of the wolves started killing its own kind. It was rushing towards MC at high speed, scattering everyone in its path, and he thought that it had finally arrived. The black wolf, the boss, arrived. Sangyeon had encountered it in his past life, but not often. The monster immediately cast a stunning effect on him, the same as his, causing him to freeze in place. The effect was aimed at Miso, but thanks to her artifact's effect, the stunning was deactivated. She realized that the black wolf had its own stunning ability. She had been so engrossed in watching Sanyeon that she had completely forgotten about it. She wanted to give him a lecture, but it was getting too hot. She prepared to shoot and thought that it had the ability to stunning, but probably didn't have the ability to deactivate it. Such a thing was very rare at a low level, but contrary to her expectations, everything turned out to be the opposite. He removed the stun effect and pounced on the wolf, and she wondered in surprise, was that even possible? A near-perfect stance for wielding a two-handed sword, an unusually long stun duration, and he can also deactivate status effects, and all this at level 17? MC ran up to the wolf, and while it was confused, he asked, did he think his prey wouldn't be able to move because of the stun? There it was, free to move. He slid under it, seeing a fleeting trace of panic in its eyes, which determined the outcome of the battle. He plunged his sword into its belly, cutting it open, and thought that panic was literally a stun state without the stun skill. Immediately after the strike, the wolf fell to the ground, crushing Sanyeon. He crawled out from under it, cursing that he had soiled his clothes, but since he was already dirty, he might as well have some fun and cause a massacre. Meanwhile, Miso watched him with a smile and wondered, who the hell was he? The system informed him of the current quest status. 299 monsters out of 300 had been killed so far. His level had been raised, and he had received the D rank title, Fearless, which grants complete immunity to status effects caused by the howls of wolf-like monsters, although it doesn't work against bosses. MC turned around, glancing at the roof of the house where the girls stood, and thought that even the doubtful look had disappeared. Now her gaze had completely switched to observation mode. He stood up and said that since the audience was watching, the performer couldn't just sit there. It was time to finish. The wolf sitting behind him growled in agreement, and he asked, is he ready? The final boss, the full moon wolf lord, immediately pounced on him and swung his paw, striking, but he managed to dodge and noted that his attacks were quite unpredictable. But 30 years later, all of his patterns had already been studied. Should he call him predictable now? He lunged forward, wounding him in the face, and said that he knew everything about him. The system informed him that due to resistance to the wolf lord's skills, the demon's strike did not work, and he noted that this was expected from a level 100 boss. Miso, meanwhile, smiled nervously and thought, isn't this complete madness? This is far from just a strange state. It's not just an immobilization state, he's resisting it, and he swings this huge sword like a piece of paper. MC meanwhile increased the distance between them, but the wolf immediately rushed towards him, its huge jaws snapping right next to his face. The wolf turned a furious gaze on him, turned around and struck with its paw, and he blocked the blow, which surprised him. Sanyeon said that he knew everything about him, and the girl thought that on top of all this, he also predicted the fickle movements of the Wolf Lord, and the most ridiculous thing was his behavior, as if he was trying to show off his strength to her. She smiled and asked what kind of person he was. The fight continued. MC dodged once again and thought that this battle was going on longer than he expected. He had already shown off in front of the girl, and now he was going crazy. If everything went according to plan, he would have already been exhausted. So why did he have so much strength? The wolf continued to follow him, and he thought that at this rate he could tire faster than this monster. His stamina and health were already running out. And then he noticed something, a familiar pattern. The wolf raised its paw, and he thought it was a powerful strike with a large window for counterattacks. But in reality, it was a ploy to land a single, deadly blow. This is a special behavior pattern of the Wolf Lord, who has taken the lives of countless players. He abruptly turned towards him and prepared to attack, saying that he hadn't used it in a real fight yet, but sometimes you have to act recklessly. Before the wolf could strike, he swung his sword, cutting off one of his arms, but he didn't seem to even notice and attacked him with the other. The girl was horrified by what she saw. The wolf stabbed him with its sharp claws and threw him aside. Suddenly losing all strength from the surge of emotions, Miso fell to her knees and worriedly called out to Sanyeon. She burst into tears and thought that this was so stupid. She wasn't fit to be a player. Even if he showed incredible skills, just standing by was the same as killing him. She was so sorry. And at that very moment, a bright green light appeared. It was a new ability he'd recently acquired. When he absorbed the goblin's shield, he gained the special sacrifice effect. All damage dealt to the selected body part is converted into healing. If the damage exceeds the player's maximum health, it will restore health equal to their maximum. He thought it was very useful, but he had to choose the body part to apply the effect to. There were a lot of points on the body, and he thought it was divided too precisely. Only 16 parts? That's too much. Usually the safest choice is the back, but even that is divided into 4 zones, so it is ineffective. In that case, he should use it more wisely. And the place he chose was wounded by a wolf. He smirked, glad that everything worked. If he had miscalculated even a little, he would have died instantly. It was close, and he also got a bonus. Because of the demon's strike, the wolf was stunned, and Sanyeon said that he was not sure if he was so lucky or unlucky. The right hand that he used as bait was cut off. Who would have thought that it would break through resistance and inflict stun? He raised the sword above his head and suggested that he move on to the next test of luck. When he restrained him, Miso came down from the roof and he said that in the end, the stun worked only on the 3rd try. Should he be happy about that? Miso approached him and he asked, is she she finally here? She looked at him with concern, then sighed heavily and said that he could have told her that he had a healing skill. She almost had a heart attack. By the way, is he living a second life or something? How does he know the Wolf Lord's moves so well? She had seen many swordsmen before, but none of them were as mysterious as him. She wanted to say something else, but saw his expression and was surprised. He was smiling mysteriously. She felt pressure from him and said that he looked like a ranked player. He was even surprised. He was afraid that she would ask if he had traveled to the past. But an ordinary player wouldn't have thought that. He was scared for nothing. She pointed at the wolf and asked, "Isn't he going to end this?" He finally remembered him. The wolf completely exhausted itself and growled softly. He smiled and promised to go easy on it, and then finished it off. The system informed him that he had received the E-rank title, Death Duel. When he is isolated and there are no allies within 5 meters to provide support, Death Duel is activated, temporarily increasing all stats by 20%. The effect immediately disappears once the isolation ends. He was very happy. This was his first title of this rank. Noticing his expression, Miso asked, "He got the title, right?" He remarked that she knew everything. Had she done quests alone before? She proudly confirmed this, but then fell silent, and with a heavy sigh, said that there was nothing to be proud of. It was all only thanks to the artifacts. She wouldn't say she cleared everything thanks to skills like he did. He said that using artifacts was also an important skill. She thanked him for such words and thought that after all, the artifacts she had were worth over 200 million won, and he uses a mass-produced greatsword that can be sold anywhere. She asked, "He's not thinking of checking this title right away, is he?" He didn't understand what she was talking about, then activated the title, and the system notified him that he was isolated with Kim Miso. Since there were no allies within a 5-meter radius, a death duel had been activated. He waved his hand over his head, deactivating the title, and laughed. Miso said that she would go first. She still needed to contact the porters. He thanked her, and thought that the quest rewards included monster byproducts. So the next natural step would be to call the porters. He had had to do this quite often in his past life too. Since they handled annoying tasks, they seemed quite reliable. The girl also said that she would give him 5% of the quest reward she had mentioned earlier. He was very surprised and objected, and she said that it was fine. He should not be so reserved. Now they would cross paths often. He should consider it her investment in him. He smiled awkwardly and thought that he couldn't relax with her until the very end. Since she was gone, it was time to do so. He turned to the wolf's body, glanced at the huge shining stone, and decided to check the reward he had been waiting for so long. It was a blue moonstone, equipment for platinum artifacts. It gave the special effect, Hour of the Wolf and Dog, and also added 100 points to experience and mana, and 50 to luck. He was very happy. He had finally reached the platinum rank. Platinum artifacts are worth at least 1 billion. This was an apartment in the center. The system informed him that the goddess of luck was asking if he believed in her, saying that it was the thrill of her touch. He glanced sideways at her and asked, how could it be her touch? It was his touch. Suddenly, another constellation appeared. The owner of Torn Lips categorically objects to the biased luck he receives, proposing to exclude the Goddess of Fortune from the player system. In response, the Goddess of Fortune unexpectedly asks everyone to vote. The vote is ongoing, and the proposal is to exclude the owner of Torn Lips. Currently, 64 constellations have voted for his exclusion. In the end, he was excluded, and the goddess grinned triumphantly. MC asked, "Is this even allowed?" He decided to get back to the matter at hand. Firstly, since it's a platinum rank, it can absorb about 40%, and the special effect is the Hour of the Wolf and Dog. This effect is always active. There is no cooldown. While the moon is visible in the dungeon, health regeneration and recovery speed are increased by 50%. Regardless of the presence of the moon, dog or wolf-type monsters are constantly afraid of the player who possesses the blue moonstone. Also, if the moon is visible, dog or wolf-type monsters will never attack a player holding a blue moonstone. Basically, he becomes more like a monster than a monster when the moon rises. He immediately began synchronizing the moonstone with mana, and when he successfully absorbed it, he entered the quest area lobby. What he saw shocked him. A crowd of players had gathered right in front of the entrance. Everyone was amazed that he had cleared a level 100 quest alone. Kim Miso wouldn't lie. Jihei stood in the middle of the crowd and looked at him worriedly. Then Miso approached her and told her not to worry. Who in their right mind would give a level 100 quest to a level 17 player? She would have stopped him too. She did everything in her power. She was touched by her words and burst into tears. And Miso looked at Sanyeon and said that they should all remember Sanyeon's appearance from now on. He will be appearing here often. He smiled and thought that now he even felt sorry for this worker. She was probably worried. After that, representatives of different guilds started pestering him, offering him to join them, but Miso drove them all away, saying that they still needed to discuss something, so they were leaving. They thought that this meant that the Eden Guild would recruit him, and she turned to MC and asked with a smirk, he didn't mind talking to her, did he? He agreed with a nervous smile and thought that this saved him. But what was her plan? She walked him to her luxurious car and they drove somewhere. He glanced at his account balance. There were 500 million won. He was very happy to see these numbers and noticed that the reward for the quest was credited. He had never received money so quickly. The girl said that she called the A-rank high-rank porters and arranged everything. He thanked her for her concern, after which she called out to the driver with a seductive look. He, understanding her hint, immediately activated secret mode and a wall descended between them. Sanyeon nervously noted that this was expected. Good things don't come for free. Miso laughed and said that she wasn't good at embellishing things. He doesn't want to join the Eden Guild? He noticed that instead of beating around the bush due to a lack of skill, it sounded more like confidence. She said with a smile that they weren't called Eden for nothing. It was a paradise for players, and she was sure he wouldn't regret it. He looked down sadly and thought that he would be lying if he said he didn't expect such an offer. Before returning to the past, he was a member of a very ordinary guild. It used to give him a sense of security. His guild was a small gathering of untalented players who had nowhere to go. He was comfortable until his comrades died. With how quickly he's growing now, infrastructure isn't important to him. There's a good chance a guild will just become a burden for him. At this stage, playing alone will contribute to his rapid growth. He refused her, and she asked if he wanted to open his own guild. He remained silent, and she noted that he was fast. She is the daughter of the chairman of a large corporation. Given his abilities, this is not hard to guess. And what's important is that she is the only one who knows this fact now. He smiled and thought that even though she knows he's going to open a solo guild, she revealed all her cards and is showing interest, creating the type of relationship that could benefit her in the future. She is a good negotiator. Time passed, and he arrived in the city of players. The realtor said they had already discussed a deposit of 100 million won and a monthly payment of 5 million won. He noticed that she was quoting such terrifying figures with such a sweet smile that they no longer seemed so terrifying to him. She laughed and remarked that despite this, he still made a great deal. There were many people wanting this place. If that was all, she needed to go. He should contact her if any problems arose. She left, and he thought with a smile that he had found himself a new place very quickly. That was for sure. All the people on the waiting list simply evaporated. Could even this be thanks to the goddess of fortune? Entering his new home, he left his things in the hallway and went to the window. So much had happened in such a short period of time. His mysterious return to the past, the sudden changes, all of it left him stunned. All day long, he was focused solely on figuring everything out, even if it led him nowhere. He had no idea how to move forward, but soon, his worldview completely changed. A feeling he had long forgotten appeared. Even though he hadn't done anything, he could practically feel the blood coursing through his veins. This is youth. Youth is in these hands, and it doesn't let him sit still. He was determined to live this life differently. He vowed not to live like a coward again. Besides, the opportunities for his growth kept coming. When he was talking to Miso about the guild, Park Jongmin called her, and he was surprised to see a top-notch report from the Player magazine. Jongmin told her that he heard the news. There was complete chaos here. Everyone was wondering who this mysterious Sangyeon was. Miso excitedly told him everything, so loudly that her voice carried over the phone, and the other workers turned their attention to Jongmin. Noticing this, he asked her to calm down. Everyone was getting too obvious. After their conversation, Miso drove Sangyeon to the Player city, but before he left, she told him they were going to explore the unknown gates soon. They were forming a free team of only 4 people under level 120. It wasn't a mission, so he didn't have to worry. He immediately and excitedly agreed, without even letting her finish. She noted that he had instantly rejected her guild offer, but had immediately agreed to this? Of course he agreed. After all, he finally had the chance to enter the gate. In short, a dungeon is a fixed location. Once you enter, the entrance and exit are fixed, and the traps and monsters act according to a predetermined program. But the gate is a constantly changing location. When clearing a gate, the exits and entrances change in real time, and sometimes even the monsters can change. As always, the higher the danger, the better the rewards. That's the unspoken rule of the player world. If it's an unknown gate, there's a first clear bonus from the system, which guarantees a high-ranking artifact. Kim Miso has probably already received this. An artifact capable of ignoring the Black Wolf's ferocity would be unavailable at this level. But then again, it's possible she doesn't have all of that. He said she'd contact him once she learned more details. They'll likely be in touch more often now. She handed him her phone, asking him to write down his number, but accidentally went to the lock screen, and MC saw the photo of deceased players she'd set as her wallpaper. Noticing this, she nervously took the phone back and said she forgot to change it to her call screen. She sighed with a smile, wondering what was wrong with her, and he was looking at her differently now. At the moment, he returned to the room and thought that she looked like someone who had a history. But what player doesn't? Even he, for example, has a history that he wouldn't tell anyone. If someone found out that he returned to the past, no matter what happened, it would just be troublesome. He remembered late-blooming Scholar and wondered where he was and what he was doing now. After all, they spent several years together. He could at least show him his face. Meanwhile, Miso was sitting in the VIP room of her guild with Cho Jinho and kept looking at her phone. He said that he thought they would have a cup of coffee for the first time in a long time. Who was she waiting for a message from? Staring at her phone like that? She answered him that she was waiting for a message from Sangyeon. They were going to explore new gates together. He noted that she seemed to have fallen in love with him, and she indignantly exclaimed that this was not the case at all. He asked if he wasn't the one who could maintain stun longer than him. He even coldly rejected Kim Miso's offer. No wonder she liked him. She smirked and said that he should worry. His swordsmanship was as high as his, maybe even higher. He laughed and asked if she was going too far just because he teased her. Comparing him to him was going too far. He was the famous Chojinho, a level 700 S-rank player. Sometime later, in the Jamsil training grounds, Sanhen answered the phone and told Miso he had received it. She asked, "Is now a good time?" She wanted to talk about the gate. He asked again, "Already? How quickly?" Yes, he could talk. Miso reported that an unknown gate had just appeared 500 meters northwest of Chunui Station on Line 7. They had already conducted preliminary reconnaissance of the middle zone, and she had just shared inside information. Sanhen told her to give him 1 second to check, and Miso asked him to take his time. He was dumbfounded when he looked at the screen and saw a medium-sized Cerberus hound, presumably a wolf dog type monster. Estimated level 100. The main feature is that it causes a delay and has many necks. Sanhen didn't understand. What the hell is this? He had just acquired the skill. He couldn't believe he'd picked it up so quickly. Cerberus only drops for the correct type, right? It's dog and wolf time, and the special effect is always active, with no cooldown. While the moon is in the dungeon, health recovery and regeneration are increased 5-fold. Regardless of the moon's phase, dog and wolf type monsters enter a state of constant fear when encountering a player holding a blue moonstone. Furthermore, if the moon is up, wolf type monsters will never attack player holding a blue moonstone. He replied yes, he just checked. Thanks for the heads up. Miso replied that it was okay to share such information, and that she would contact him later. Deacon approached him and asked if he'd called someone over. So what was he doing now? Sanhen apologized to the captain and said he was joking. He was famous now, after all, and he understood everything. Sanhen told him to stop talking about it. He wasn't famous at all. He still had a lot to look forward to. Deacon asked again. Judging by the way he was talking, he hadn't received that call yet? Sanhen asked again. What call was that? He showed him the phone screen and said it was better to see it once than hear about it 100 times. He was on the player's front page. If after this he wasn't a celebrity, then who was he? Sanhen was dumbfounded and started screaming in surprise. What was that? Deacon laughed and said he should turn off his phone right away because it would be inundated with calls. It's not that he didn't want to be on the front page of this news, but would they publish someone without approval? Deacon asked again. What was that? He was already getting calls from his fourth cousins. He said he only had first cousins, then asked to get down to business. Deacon asked, really? He said he was talking about that, right? He showed him the bag, and Sanhen, surprised, said, exactly, thank him very much. Deacon asked again, him? People might think he was giving it away for free. By the way, all these artifacts were covered in his old fingerprints, and he asked again, why not? Wouldn't it be better for them to just buy new ones? Sanhen suggested that perhaps he simply wanted to inherit his fighting spirit and determination. Deacon asked if this was his excuse again. He smiled and told him to just dismiss it as some kind of superstition or omen. He didn't know how to explain to him that older artifacts were better absorbed. In any case, before he could finish his sentence, a girl suddenly ran up to them and apologized for being late. She couldn't find parking. Would they start the appraisal right away? Sanhen didn't understand and asked who she was. Deacon replied that she was the appraiser who would help with the deal. He brought her simply because they knew each other. After that, Deacon laughed and Sanhen tensed up. When Sanhen laid out all the items for appraisal, the girl began using her magical powers to complete the appraisal of the artifacts. When it was done, she sighed with relief and announced that the appraisal was complete. It seemed they could continue at the price they'd already named, but in Deacon's opinion, it seemed he hadn't planned to lower the price. Sanhen thought, of course not. Deacon began to draw his sword from its sheath and suggested that before the final sale, perhaps he should take a look at his sword. He was dumbfounded and replied that he wasn't qualified for that. He told him to stop pretending to be humble, because he wasn't so stupid as to not understand that he was now above him. He's not stupid enough to let his ego stop him from learning anything. Sanhen replied that he truly believed that. He hated situations like this, but at that moment he decided to look Deacon in the eye and realized that ignoring someone who was sincere would be heartless. Then he should ignore him and just show him what he usually did. Deacon smiled and replied, okay. After that, Sanhen turned to the appraiser and told her that she should stand behind him. She replied that she understood everything, and Deacon began shouting loudly that he was starting. At that moment, he swung his weapon and began to move from one place to another. It was impressive for Sanhen, as he'd grown since he'd last seen him in the dungeon. He could tell he'd been training non-stop. But at that moment, a multitude of bright beams of light erupted, and Deacon asked in surprise, already? He could still show him. Sanhen asked again, is his left arm okay? Deacon tensed and asked how he knew that. Sanhen replied that when he swung his right arm, his left shoulder opened too early. He thought he was focusing too much on that side, unless he was mistaken, of course. Deacon frowned and replied that he was actually right. A small injury was blocking his left side, meaning he couldn't open it. Most of the wounds he'd received as a child or while exploring dungeons had been on that side. and he knew it, but he couldn't cure it. Sanhen noted that it could be cured and looked at him in surprise. Sanhen said the injury was easier to heal than he thought. He shouldn't hide the part he was aware of. Instead, he needed to choose a bold swordsmanship style that would reveal it. It wouldn't be easy to completely change the grip, but he would greatly improve his technique. He should try gripping it as if he were squeezing that finger much harder. When the appraiser approached, she watched questioningly, and Deacon asked again. It wasn't that easy, was it? He asked him to be gentle, as it was hurting him, and he was asking him to hold on a little longer. The girl became embarrassed at hearing such cries, and her face grew redder from their conversation. Deacon corrected him verbally, and Sanhen asked again, like this? Does he like it? Now he should bend at the waist like this. She didn't understand what they were doing, and she felt deeply ashamed. The boys were working tensely, and she couldn't understand what she was even looking at. The appraiser's browser search history was cancelled due to this topic. Sometime later, Sanhen was driving through the city in his car. The deal was good, even though it cost him 4 million won. The benefit he would gain from it must be worth much more. The protagonist noted that he seemed satisfied with the swordsmanship lesson, and the appraiser looked at them strangely when they finished. Maybe she was just tired? In any case, he needed to hurry and eat these artifacts quickly to see how much progress he made. And how could he wait for the next gate to open? Perhaps he should call Miso first. But suddenly he froze and braked abruptly when he saw a man jump out onto the road and stop right in front of him. Sanhen panicked and apologized, asking if he was okay. He had hit his blind spot. The man asked again, has he finally arrived? He slammed a folder on his car and said he'd been waiting for him for too long. What was he doing? Let him get out of his car. Sanhen didn't understand and asked again, what? His partner replied that an idiot always reacts that way. He must have misheard. Sanhen tensed and felt a terrifying dark aura. The guy told him, do you want to burn in this car or get out of here? When he started using magic, Sanhen realized he remembered that these guys were Yeonchol and Seonho from the Utopia Guild. Yeonchol deliberately chooses people weaker than himself, and Seonho is just a servant filming videos for his video hosting site. Thanks to his borderline content, he always has a couple of loyal subscribers who always watch his new videos. But after he crossed the line, the player repeatedly committed crimes, was in prison, received a life sentence, and soon everyone forgot about him. At that moment, he began to mock the fact that he couldn't even move. Well, in other words, they were both not human. Yeonchol asked why he was so annoying. Sanhen said he wanted to see the progress the new artifacts would make, but he didn't want to test them on these opponents. At that moment, Yeonchol noticed something, and Sanhen asked, so what? He got out of the car and stood in front of him. Yeonchol asked again, what do you think? He told him not to rush him and to calm down. He represents security here in the player city, and many people have complained about some idiot driving around in such a disgraceful car. In other words, they're angry that they have to be somehow connected to his car. At that moment, he kicked the car door, and Sanhen got angry. Yeonchol asked again, has this finally dawned on him? If he doesn't want his car turned into a pile of scrap metal, then he should pack his junk and get out of here. Passersby nearby noticed what was happening and realized that those jerks were here again. They also noticed that this guy Sanhen, wasn't he from the player's cover photo? He was the one doing the quest with Miso. What was his name again? Sanhen? Yeonchol. Is he strong? Seonho replies that he remembered that he was with Sanhen and is entering his peak era, since he was the one who cleared a level 100 dungeon solo. Yeonchol asked again, alone, but he looks like a weakling. Seonho replied, yes, that happened to him. They laughed and he already thought of the title of their next video. Yeonchol replied that he couldn't believe how good he was at this. They were going to teach the rookie Sanhen a lesson. At that moment, while the protagonist was looking at the dented car door, Yeonchol moved closer to him and said he would show him a little pity and offer to fight one-on-one, like in training. If he wins, he leaves the player's city forever. And of course, he will be in their video. And if he wins, then they will avoid him, okay? Sanhen replied, okay, that their Sanhen is a real man. At that moment, Sanhen got angry and started shouting that if he adds 500,000 to the bet and his wrist, then it will be fine. If he's scared, then he should just get out of here. He was dumbfounded and was about to call him names when suddenly Sono called him, and he turned around and asked, what? He didn't see that he was busy? Sono told him to look at this. This was their chat right now. Yeonchol was scared, and Sanhen asked again, do you agree, or have you already shit your pants? Yeonchol realized that if he agreed, the video would be given an age restriction for violence, and he wouldn't be able to make money from it. He thought he'd take this chance to relieve his stress. A moment later, they found themselves in the square and stood opposite each other. Player City, the C Plaza building. The people around didn't understand what was happening here. Could it really be Sanhen? They picked on the newbie as usual. Sanhen activated training mode and took a special position. The players experienced a barrier effect. Yeonchol said that just like he said, 500,000 and their wrists are on the line. Not to worry, because he would keep his word. Then he shouldn't beg for mercy. It's better to run now. The system reported, training mode, it's now fully configured. Players should please begin combat training. Training mode set. Sanhen breathed a sigh of relief and Yeonchol asked again, did he hear that? They were starting, and he wasn't joking. But before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly heard his name. He looked ahead in surprise, and Sanhen was already swinging at him from above. Sanhen shouted that he wasn't joking either, that even if he begged for mercy, he still wouldn't spare him. A fight broke out between them, and Miso, who was sitting at home and saw it on TV, asked, "Sanhen, what's going on here?" When she heard those words, she realized it was Yeonchol from the Utopia Guild. He was a player, but she heard that he was only showing off because his uncle was the guildmaster. Why was he here with Sanhen? Her sister approached her and asked, "What's wrong? Why is she so gloomy?" Terry was level 700 and S rank. When she looked at the TV, she realized who this guy was. Wasn't he the one she wanted to recruit? Miso replied, "Yes, his name was Sanhen, and she had no idea what he was doing on that crappy podcast." Terry replied that his movements were abrupt, and at that moment, the fight between him and Yeonchol continued. Yeonchol got angry and called him names, then jumped to the side, and Sanhen's blow sent a ton of rocks flying everywhere. He swung his magic hand and said, "This brat is definitely a bandit, right?" He struck Sanhen with his flames, but Sanhen managed to grab his sword and intercept the attack. Yeonchol was surprised by this, and Sanhen was able to easily stop and redirect the fire beam to the side where it exploded. Yeonchol didn't understand what was wrong with this bastard. Sanhen stood up and finally answered. Since returning to his previous body, he hadn't let himself down. He recalled that, thanks to the appraiser, the deal had gone quickly, and the work had been excellent today. That had been 3 hours ago, and the girl had told him there was no need to praise her, since they had worked hard together and she had enough. Deacon exclaimed, "A good deal deserves a proper celebration. Let her join them, Madam Appraiser. They now have money, and they're treating her." Sanhen replied that he couldn't do that. "Let them go alone." Deacon exclaimed, "What? Is it because he'd overpaid him?" "Yes, he'd give him some back." But Sanhen replied that he already had plans for today, so he apologized. Deacon understood the gist, and replied, "Okay, Madam Appraiser, it seems it will be just the two of them." The appraiser replied that she'd completely forgotten, since she also had an important meeting today. Sanhen understood that now the artifacts would be more delicious than the booze, and at that moment the appraiser ran off. When Sanhen found himself alone, he let out a calm sigh, and the system reported that the absorption rate was being measured. The base absorption rate for bronze was 10%. The artifact's lifespan had been retroactively adjusted, resulting in a final absorption rate of 90%. Sanhen looked at his hands and realized, 90%? The goddess of fortune believed that all such joys came from her, the goddess of fortune. Usually, he only received a tenth of that amount due to absorption restrictions. As expected, used junk was a different matter entirely. Right, there's something he wanted to ask her, the goddess of fortune. She's known as a social constellation, right? Perhaps she's heard of constellations that mark the late bloom of a model student. The goddess of fortune claimed that in recent days, all her attention had been focused on the player, and she scolded him for his interest in another constellation. At that moment, Sanhen replied that this constellation simply meant a lot to him. But upon reflection, the goddess of fortune had every right to be offended. He felt sorry for her, and he should forget about it. The goddess frowned, and the system reported that the goddess of fortune had turned to face him again. The goddess of fortune, being very noble, would seek out this constellation for the player. He asked hopefully, "Was that really true?" "Thank her." Well, in that case, he could finally begin this feast. The system reported that the process of synchronizing mana with 5 artifacts had begun. The top 5 dishes of a true man. When several dishes appeared before Sanhen, he realized that no matter how battered the artifacts were, even real dishes wouldn't be so brutal. Artifacts with a maximum absorption rate of 90%. He couldn't even imagine how strong he would become once he absorbed them all. The system reported that the title True Duel was activated. The isolation was player Yeonchol, no allies were detected within range, and True Dueling Instinct was activated. Sanhen said it was going to be intense. The system reported player information, the title Death Duel and 6 others, the special skill Artifact Devouring, the constellation Goddess of Fortune, and the number of artifacts acquired was 17. Yeonchol began to shake, and the commentators wondered if he was already exhausted. Sanhen was fully prepared and looked at his opponent, when suddenly Yeonchol began screaming loudly and attacking him. Miso, sitting at home, was scared and exclaimed to him to be careful. Terry told her not to be afraid. She knew he could dodge. Sanhen asked again, didn't he forget their agreement? At that moment, he swung his sword and announced that for 500 million won, he would take his arm. At that moment, Sanchol rejoiced at the fact that he had been caught, causing his leg to end up in the magical abyss. Yeonchol smiled and declared that he had won. "You idiot." He gave him the middle finger, both as a sign of victory and disrespect. Sanhen found himself inside a magical seal, and the system reported that all conditions had been met. Sanhen's player, the freeze skill, had been activated. He was dumbfounded and began to ponder what was happening. Terry realized that he could use more than just fire magic. It might work. Miso chuckled and told him not to be surprised and to listen carefully. Sanhen could even cancel the effect of an entire herd. She shouldn't underestimate him. Now she would understand why she wanted to recruit him so badly. If she were to watch closely with her own eyes, suddenly Sanhen turned into an ice shard. A moment later there was silence, and she didn't understand what was happening. When Yeonchol approached, he asked, "Sanhen? Where had he gone?" The skill was activated. Until he used the stat cancellation, there was no escape. Maybe he wasn't such a rookie after all? At that moment, Sanhen pounced on him from behind and swung his sword, striking him straight in the back. Yeonchul fell to the ground, and Sanhen asked again, "What? He was saved by the training mod?" The system reported that fatal damage was prevented thanks to the training mod. Sonho asked in surprise, "Yeonchul?" He started looking through the comments and realized that if he thought about it, he really did have a different vibe now. Which one did he use? Terry suggested it looked like some kind of skill awakening, and Miso asked again, "Sanhen's skill awakening?" Terry answered yes, it looked like Transcendence or Psychedelia. Seeing those black pupils, she'd say it was Psychedelia. As far as she knew, damaging those skills takes a lot of effort. Was he planning to win without Yeonchul touching him at all? That was overconfidence on his part, and Miso chuckled and replied that he wouldn't succeed. He definitely changed, but he never used that skill when he was with her, and that skill requires a lot of luck. Terry replied that in that case, one of two things would happen. Either there was no reason to use it when he was with her, but before she could finish speaking, she suddenly fell silent, after which she said that either he found a way to get it in a short time. At that moment, the appraiser looked at the document and realized that she needed to test the artifact Sanhen had bought today for its potential power. Right? But the probability of a hidden skill was still negligible, so if it did activate, it would be like being kissed by the goddess of fortune herself. The system reported that Psychedelic was a hidden skill, awakening an enhanced skill with a 1-hour cooldown. The skill level is 1. Upon activation, it fully restores health and enters an awakening state for 100 seconds. Physical and mental abilities go far beyond their limits, entering a berserker-like state. In the awakened state, decision-making, information processing becomes much faster than usual. Sometimes, the psychedelic effect ends, and the player falls into a state of extreme exhaustion for 10 minutes due to accumulated damage. Sanhen asked again, "So what about his wrist?" He reached his sword toward him and asked if they should turn off the training mode and try again. Yeonchul got angry and told him to get lost. He realized he'd underestimated him because he looked like a beginner and didn't expect such power. Now, he'd take him seriously. First, he needed distance. But was that even possible? Wasn't that completely different from what Sonho had said? He knew he was strong, but he hadn't expected it to be this strong. Maybe the bastard was just delirious. Sonho saw everyone around him start covering their faces from the emerging wind and became frightened. Sanhen cried out and grabbed his head, telling him that he would end it now. It was time to fulfill his promise, and he slammed his head into the ground and told him not to be afraid, because the training mode would keep him alive. Yeonchul screamed in pain, saying, "Okay, he won. He'll transfer 500 million right now." Sanhen responded with a swing. "Okay, the argument is over, but what's about to happen now is personal." Yeonchul asked again, What personal?" Sanhen was surprised by his question and said, "Here's why he started this. 3 days ago, at the car dealership, an employee said they'd fix the car, but he still had to replace it soon." Sanhen asked again, "What does that mean?" He replied, "Yes, it's too old a model." And Sanhen was surprised that that simply couldn't be true. The guy said he seemed attached to it and should say goodbye soon. He realized that this car had been with him everywhere, and he thought it was happy too. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he imagined the car telling him to be happy, taking him everywhere. "Take care of yourself." At that moment, he became extremely angry, and clenching his fist, screamed that this was happening to his car. A piece of shit. Yeonchul cried and apologized to him several times, and the people around him didn't understand what was happening. Sanhen became so angry that Yeonchul suddenly peed in his pants right there, because he was so scared. He continued to cry and apologize, telling him not to touch him. The people around him were surprised. Was he really that scared? How bad it smelled in there now. Sonho didn't understand what to do now. They had stumbled into something they shouldn't have stumbled into. At that moment, a man approached him and asked if his name was Mr. Seonho. It was the administrator who said he had crossed the line and would be held accountable. The administrator of the Baekhyun district. They apologized, but at that moment, Baekhyun turned his attention to Sanhen. In any case, such an interesting situation occurred. He stood up and turned around, wondering if that had landed on his back too. He'd heard he'd recently awakened, but he'd just carried out Yeonchul, so he wanted to know more about him. Baekhyun turned to Sanhen, who looked at him questioningly, and said he'd come to resolve the incident and pay compensation. "Does he have a minute?" Sanhen asked. Perhaps he should show his ID first? Baekhyun realized what arrogance— wait, it wasn't arrogance but composure, like that of a player who'd been through a lot. His skills and demeanor were beyond his level. At that moment, he bowed and shouted that his name was Baekhyun, the administrator of the Utopia Guild in the Gandon district. He apologized for introducing himself late. He realized they needed to recruit this guy, and the Utopia Guild would pay all the compensation. Sanhen asked, "Really? Small losses aren't so bad if he shows good faith and establishes contact." Sanhen then proposed a purely symbolic 20 billion won. He thought 5 billion wouldn't be enough. Here's his bank account number. He didn't even consider emotional damages or anything else. Baekhyun was stunned when he saw this number and asked again, could he give some kind of discount? Sometime later, as Sanhen was returning home, reporters followed him. He couldn't understand when they had even managed to get there. They were shouting his name and asking if the Utopia Guild had paid him compensation. He asked again, were they really planning on standing here forever? They ignored him and asked, "Is there any news from Miso? Are you sure he has no ties to the Eden Guild?" He entered the room and said, "Yeah, right. Let them go already." They asked again. He was just returning from training, right? Sanhan barely managed to close the door because the reporters rushed straight at him, shouting that people should know about this, and that he should just answer the question. Were the rumors about his affair with Miso true? Sanhan asked again. People should know about someone's personal life? He hadn't yet put his life in order. An affair? In his case, this was quite strange. It was time for him to prepare and looked at the things laid out on the bed. He couldn't believe that the day had come to explore the gate Miso had proposed exploring together. Because of this, last week had been complete chaos, but the result was worth it. Who would have thought that contact with Deacon would yield a new artifact so quickly? On top of that, the demon's strike had improved since the last battle. The greatsword had also improved, and with the suppressive effect title effect, it's about 2.6 seconds, right? If he added the delay effect on top, would it last more than 5 seconds? Of course, this varies depending on the opponent. Demon Strike inflicts a 2 or 4 second stun on monsters or unprotected players. However, the duration or success rate depends on the target's resistance. A two-handed sword significantly improves proficiency with all swords except daggers and one-handed longswords. Sanhan smiled and announced that they weren't even finished yet. He decided to see the results of all this training, and the system reported training with wrists, which improves proficiency with daggers and one-handed swords. A full charge concentrates enormous energy and then instantly rushes forward to strike enemies. The longer the charge, the greater the damage and duration. However, during the charge time, movement is completely limited. He exhaled and realized, all right, with this preparation, he was more than ready to explore the gate, with additional weapons and mobility skills, of course. There were a lot of frustrating gaps in his recent battles. He couldn't fully replicate his previous experience. Fighting the wolf, he had to take risks due to the limitations of the attack village. In the fight with Yanchol, he fell into all the traps due to his lack of mobility. In other words, all his callers were stronger than him. He almost gave up. He needs to be realistic. At this rate of growth or otherwise, he'll just repeat the same failures as before. And the second collaboration, which will happen in 2040, this time, he must be sure that the future will turn out differently. He can't lose everything again. This time, in this life, he must become stronger. And then, just like that man, but before he could fully consider this thought, someone called him. He answered, and it turned out to be reporter Jungmin, which surprised Sanhan. He said he was calling about the interview they had arranged last week, and it would take place today. He just wanted to make sure it was still convenient for him. Sanhan cursed and shouted, "Of course, it's soon, right?" He replied, "Yes," and offered to meet at the restaurant. He sent him the address. Sanhan had completely forgotten about this. The gate clearing was at 7 p.m., and the interview was at 2, and now it was 1:45 a.m., and he was dumbfounded. When he went out to the entrance, the other journalists were waiting for him and asked if he was here. Let him tell them the story of his affair with Miso. He got angry and told everyone to leave. He used the psychedelic skill that was activated, and the user's body is additionally strengthened. The user's speed increases significantly. After some time, he arrived at the journalist's room, and Jungmin waved to him and said that he was here. He ordered coffee, so let him come in here and sit down, when suddenly he froze and realized that he looked tense. Sanhan's face darkened with anger, and he was breathing heavily because he was late. Jungmin asked again, had he just exited a dungeon? Sanhan replied, not at all. It was worse than dungeons. He apologized for being late, and Jungmin said everything was fine. By the way, he initially requested an interview because of the incidents in the quest zone, but another important event had happened, hadn't it? Sanhan replied that it didn't matter. The events were just a minor inconvenience, really. Jungmin noted that the more he thought about it, the more it became a topic of discussion among players. Of course, people say that rank or skill doesn't determine skill level these days, but he's an exception with his low level, and everyone calls him an exceptional newbie. He replied, oh well, there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, did he know a guild, not just reporters, was hunting him? Sanhan realized he'd received many offers recently, and he was hinting at the Eden Guild, or maybe others have been doing the same lately. But before he could finish, Jungmin interrupted him and said no, he wasn't even talking about domestic guilds, but foreign ones. He probably hadn't heard the news today. A total of 5 foreign guilds submitted official player information requests to the Korean Players Association this morning. Overseas guilds and purebred puppies, even if those puppies are a bit low level. He'd never seen them show such interest in newbies like him, and in any case, he should probably be on guard from now on, because a lot of people are keeping an eye on him right now. After a while, in the spawn zone, a back alley near Chunui Station, he was upset because he was planning to play solo, not in a guild, but a foreign guild is nothing special. It's just that the level they work at is different. He could only remember how poorly they treated him before. Yes, they really do hit hard. At that moment, he saw Miso approaching him and waving, saying they hadn't seen each other in a while and that he should come here. They still had time before the raid. He was surprised to see Terry behind her and asked who she was. When they gathered, Miso said her sister wanted to meet him. He was surprised, and she said that was why she glanced at him before the raid began. This is her sister Terry. She's with her in the Eden Guild. If he wants to hang out somewhere, there's a cafe nearby. Terry approached him and said it was nice to meet him. He also gave his name and sheepishly said, "Nice to meet you." Although Miso didn't mention her, there isn't a single player in all of Korea who hasn't experienced everyday life. She's a top-tier player. Her fame extends even beyond Korea. She's one of the leading players in the Eden Guild. Her presence alone in the guild can raise her rank. He met such cool people after returning to the past. In his past life, everything was different. At that moment he exhaled, and Terry asked if she could ask him for a favor. He was surprised that it happened so suddenly, and said that if it was something he could do, then no problem. Terry replied, "Nothing serious. Could he spar with her?" Miso was surprised and asked again, was she serious about this? They had just met. Terry asked again, "So what?" She warned her on the way here. That's why they needed Sanhen. Miso started screaming that wasn't what she said at all. At that moment, she laughed and apologized to Sanhen. She just has that kind of personality. She likes to joke around. Sanhen replied that he didn't mind, and she was surprised. Maybe they could start right now? He said that it wasn't every day that he gets offered a sparring match with one of the best players in Korea, and for him, this was part of it. Terry replied that Miso seemed to have a keen eye for people, and he should forgive her treatment. He'd been a bit harsh before. How about they demonstrate just 5 moves? Let him know when he's ready. She created a magical sphere in her hand, and he tensed. He realized he had practically no chance, but this was an excellent opportunity to see how far he'd come and where his weaknesses still lay. However, all she did was select a weapon, and suddenly her aura changed completely in an instant. This time, there would be no weakening. He was ready. He used his psychedelic skills and would give it his all from the very beginning. Miso was surprised and asked what that was. She couldn't keep up with the developments, and Terry suggested starting with the first move. When the magical wave began to spread everywhere, Sanhen froze and realized he was an idiot. With his current body level, he'd completely forgotten that his reaction was too slow. He tried to defend himself with his sword and realized he needed to anticipate and react in advance. Terry was surprised when he managed to defend himself and said it was a good move. Should she hit harder? Terry announced that there were 4 moves left, and at that moment, multiple beams of light appeared around the protagonist. He noted that this was expected and that it was an incredible move, and she was only accelerating. In moments like these, just like when visual analysis of a malfunction is unavailable, he needs to read her movement through sensation, and of course, this time the difficulty is 10 times higher. Miso looked at him questioningly and realized that he would close his eyes in such a situation. Even for him, that was insane. It was simply too reckless. Sanhen closed his eyes and began to try to use his mana when he suddenly realized he needed to act now. He anticipated the move and defended himself, and she noted that his focus was truly impressive. She didn't expect him to block the attack even a second time. Most masters can't achieve such concentration. It's not a matter of talent, but of experience. He agreed, and Terry said that he was just like a veteran player. Sanhen said she flattered him, and Terry noted that there were 3 moves left. Before they continue, could he ask something? In that case, instead of demonstrating 3 techniques one by one, maybe she could demonstrate them all at once. Terry was dumbfounded and asked again what he said. He replied that he knew it sounded presumptuous, but he couldn't pass up such an opportunity. Please, just this once, all she had. She knew he was telling the truth. If he couldn't withstand her full potential, he wouldn't be able to grow past this point. Miso asked Terry to listen to her, but she said she didn't mind, and Miso started yelling for her to listen. Terry didn't pay attention and said that she still couldn't be 100% serious. They hadn't activated the training mode. What she would demonstrate was a simple high-speed strike. Skills are too difficult to control properly. He can't use it on people. Sanhen noted that this would be more than enough. A high-speed strike from Terry herself. The fact that she was taking it seriously was already a victory. She bent down and said, "Okay, then she'll do it like in a real fight, because the moment she loses, she attacks." He realized he was going to die. He didn't have enough time to sense her location, and he had to be completely prepared. And instead of swinging his sword before his opponent revealed himself, he should move as if he were the first. At that moment, he froze and realized that the Shadow Mirage skill had been activated. He turned around abruptly and asked, "What?" She hit him in the face and he choked. Terry asked again, "Is he okay?" He fell face first into the ground and said he was fine. She said she wouldn't use the skill, but she did it anyway. When he got up, he grabbed his head because it hurt a lot. It seemed he'd bruised his forehead. His whole face turned red from the blow, and Terry apologized because she said she wouldn't use the skill, but it somehow happened instinctively. "Is he okay?" She helped him up, and he said that everything was fine, and to be honest, it was an honor that she fought with him at full strength. She noted that it was the same for her, but next time she hoped they would have the opportunity to talk properly. He looked surprised and smiling, replied that he'd be happy to. She asked again, "Really?" They shook hands, and Miso noted the gesture. At that moment, she turned her attention to herself and said that the speech was about to begin. And also, they definitely had to compile the guild report today. Terry apologized and said fine. Then she wished her luck on the raid and let Miso write about how it ended. Miso said goodbye to her. This was his first defeat since returning to the past. If Terry had fought at full strength from the very beginning, he wouldn't have survived even one hit. Suddenly, he found something to strive for. At that moment, she turned and looked him in the eyes. Sanhen watched her go and asked, "She's saying go ahead? Should he try to get around her?" After some time, They found themselves near unidentified enemy number 727 at Chunui Station. Miso was delighted and clapped her hands, saying they would introduce themselves and that these guys would be with them. The guys greeted each other, and Sanhen said his name and said he was very lucky to have such cool guys on his team. The guy replied that they were lucky. He had just read an article about him and he was simply incredible. His name is Taeseok. He's a mage and mainly specializes in spell igniter. He is level 120 and has a player rank of A. Sanhen asked, "Does this mean fire?" He replied, "Yes, it looks like what Yanchol used back then." He noted that, however, he spent most of his game time using flame skills, so his firepower should be superior to his. But he's still at the blue flame stage, so he still has some work to do. Sanhen replied, "No, he looks pretty capable. It's smart. Until his skills stabilize, it's better for him to focus on one thing." The reason he defeated Yanchol so easily was also because instead of focusing on one thing, he took a little bit of everything, which made him weak in everything. In other words, he wasn't a master of anything. Miso said that this girl, Julie, possessed spatial abilities. She was also a mage but specialized in spatial communication. Julie said yes, what her sister said was true. She is level 100 and A-rank mage. She said that since Taeseok demonstrated his skill, she would also show it to someone else. At that moment, they stopped her, and a strong wind arose. Miso exclaimed that she asked her not to do that, and she apologized. Sanhen didn't understand what that gust of wind was. Shouldn't it be spatial communication? The protagonist was dumbfounded when he saw another world and a magic ball in front of him, and Julie said that this was her ability. "Please let him take care of her." Sanhen replied, "No, he should be the one speaking." As expected of Miso, she'd put together a very balanced team. He handled close-range combat, Miso handled ranged combat, Taeseok filled in any gaps in firepower, and Julie could create tactical variations. Even without a healer, their team was perfect. But most importantly, they had good compatibility. They'd obviously fought together with this lineup before, and the knowledge of their partners helps them survive even better than good strategy. He'd been like that once before, and he recalled it with a smile on his face. At that moment, Miso returned his attention and asked if everything was okay. Was he injured after Terry? He replied that he was perfectly fine, and simply thought for a second. It was time for him to let go of the past. He approached the barrier and asked, "Well, are they leaving?" He needed to think less about what had happened and more about what was happening right now. They had arrived at an unidentified gate or an icy hell. When they entered, Sanhen thanked Taeseok, who turned and looked at him questioningly. Sanhen replied that without his buff, he would have frozen himself. It was a skill called Blessing of Flames, which increases cold resistance. Miso noted that it hadn't been so cold on the last expedition, but thanks to Taeseok, they were alive. He must have hit the jackpot this time. Miso asked Sanhen if he had other weapons besides his two-handed sword, so why didn't he use them? Sanhen replied that he decided they'd need a more mobile approach to combat for this raid, and he'd chosen something suitable. She was surprised and asked, "So he could always use multiple weapons? Swordsmen usually stick to one, and he'd been striving for that from the beginning. He's too lazy to come up with excuses. That's the only downside to going back in time." Miso turned to Julie, and suddenly a monster appeared before them. She shouted that they were following the plan. Julie listened and used her magic powers to attack the monster that appeared before them. A bright flash of light appeared in front of the creature's face, and Sanhen and Miso began attacking it from behind. Miso said they were waiting for his orders, Sanhen, and he would inform them that in that case, they should provide covering fire. He eagerly rushed into the fight. The monster began to roar loudly, and Sanhen noticed something. It began to fall on top of him, but the monster suddenly turned and noticed them. When Miso noticed this, she exclaimed, "Taeseok," and he replied, "Yes," after which he used his magical powers to help them. A bright magic arrow flew straight at the monster, and the creature roared in pain and terror as the protagonist finished it off and cut it into small pieces. He exclaimed, "Julie." She replied that she understood everything and created a magic circle, causing the monster to tense up and roar even louder. When the creature punched the wall, it shattered into pieces, and he smiled when he saw the fallen sword on the ground. But Sanhen appeared behind him and asked, "So, did you think you won?" The monster was stunned by this and turned to see Sanhen already attacking him near his face. Taeseok exclaimed to Julie that they should prepare for the next attack, and at that moment, the system reported that the strike skill at level 2 had been activated. The monster was surprised, and Sanhen gritted his teeth in anger and smashed the creature's head. They were dumbfounded and didn't know how to react. When the monster's head fell to the ground, Sanhen landed too, and everyone started asking, "What just happened?" Taeseok said that the original plan wasn't to kill with one blow. Sanhen apologized for this, and they said he had nothing to apologize for because it was something special. Miso asked again, "Didn't she tell you?" She had the same reaction the first time. All the guys turned to look at her in confusion, and Miso continued, saying that he hadn't even shown his best, right? After saying that, he now felt like he had to show his best. Why was she praising him so much? Well, it wasn't a great challenge for those working together for the first time. They were experienced players after all. They showed promise. Now they should move on to the second round. A moment later, they destroyed a few more monsters, and Taeseok exclaimed, "Seriously, he's incredible. He's the best he's ever been on a team with." Sanhen thanked him for that, and there was an awkward pause. Miso, who was following them, chuckled and said that even if it was awkward, he should get used to it. Taeseok didn't necessarily need to use magic. Thanks to him, he could use his skills at will, which made him happy. Sanhen realized that even before the hopeless swordsman, they usually relied on support spells, but it was simple. He really didn't put too much pressure on him. Miso asked Sanhen, by the way, what kind of skill was that? He looked surprised by the question, and she said seriously she should get used to it by now. But he managed to surprise her again and again. A moment later, a powerful explosion thundered in the forest, and a monster appeared before them. They began fighting again, when the monsters suddenly began attacking and fleeing. Miso exclaimed that there were armed ogre demons ahead. Taeseok asked what they should do. They had caught them so abruptly off guard. Miso replied, yes, they should concentrate all their firepower on this one. First, they need to create distance. At that moment, Sanhen asked if Julie could open a portal for him that led directly to this one. Everyone was surprised, and Miso exclaimed that it was defense-oriented. But at that moment she realized that he was preparing. At such moments, she just needs to trust. The portal opened, and Sanhen rushed straight inside, after which the system reported, fully charged, active skill, movement skill. Level 1. It charges a powerful bolt of energy, after which it instantly launches forward and strikes the enemy. The longer the charge, the greater the damage and range of the throw. However, while charging, movement is completely limited. When a bright flash of light occurred and Sanhen found himself in this portal, he approached the monster incredibly quickly, unexpectedly. They were stunned by what they saw, and asked, is this really true? Miso noted that it was a mobility skill, but she'd never seen it so powerful. Sanhen said he used it a little more aggressively because he trusted his team. At that moment, Julie asked everyone to be quiet. It looked like they were there. The guys lay down on the ground and peered down from the cliff to see a huge monster sleeping there. It was the mid-boss, a Cerberus of the Ice Hell. The guys decided to summarize their plan, and Julie said they had too little information. Maybe she should prepare some portals. Miso guessed that meant they were moving to Plan E and asked what Sanhen was doing now. He simply stared forward and remained silent, but he was smiling broadly, and the guys noticed that expression again. They should just trust him again. The guys started asking, did he come up with something? Sanhen pulled his sword from his knife and told them to just watch. They were surprised and dumbfounded, after which they exclaimed, okay, but at least let him explain. Sanhen understood there was no time to explain everything. To activate the special effect, the wolves must be clearly visible. Even if it were hidden behind clouds, only half the effect would be effective. He apologized to the guys and immediately rushed toward the monster. The boss suddenly opened his eyes and noticed him. Sanhen understood that he was asking for forgiveness, not permission. He greeted the monster and said that even up close, it wasn't cute at all. The monster growled loudly, and Miso exclaimed that they should be ready to cover it up. Julie said, right now, but isn't that strange? It doesn't react to him at all. Miso noted that they were right. Is he being cautious? No. The last time they encountered it, it was aggressive from the start. At that moment, the monster suddenly jumped up and began screaming loudly, and Taeseok noted that it moved. Maybe he misheard, but okay, they needed help. Miso realized that this wasn't an attack pose, it was a submission pose. The monster sat down opposite the protagonist, and the system reported that the Ice Hell Cerberus saw him as a high-ranking creature, entering a state of complete submission. Sanhen asked, is this really cute? Then he'd deal with it quickly. The system reported after a while that he defeated the mid-boss Ice Hell Cerberus. He was reluctant to kill the one who'd submitted, but if he didn't, they wouldn't advance. He'd received a title from his rank, abbreviation. Title information, he must select one skill to have the cooldown. He understood that this would be excellent for recovery. It instantly removes status effects from the player themselves. The applied effect was a split, and the cooldown was reduced by 50%, the original cooldown being 60 seconds. Miso exclaimed, wait a minute, and Sanhen turned around and asked, what happened? Suddenly, he saw a bright beam of light nearby and realized that, on reflection, they'd never discussed loot distribution. He'd been solo for so long that he'd made such a mistake. She asked, he's not going to take it all for himself, is he? He defeated Cerberus single-handedly. It's all his. When she said this, he froze and smiled, saying, thank God, meaning thank you. But what would the others say? She turned to the guys and said that he saw they'd come to a unanimous agreement. The guys were happy and offered to let him take it all for himself. Sanhen laughed and thanked them. He needed to break this habit of speaking first, a remnant of his old life. Miso agreed with everything that was happening and said they would retreat while he went forward and did what he usually did. He asked, what did she mean? Miso replied that every time he received an artifact, doesn't he do this? Sanhen was dumbfounded and asked, what did that mean? She didn't want to say anything, but Miso interrupted him and said that she'd actually known everything for a long time. Right after they'd cleared that area, she'd been about to leave first, when she'd turned to see what he was doing and seen his secret. He realized what it meant. This day had arrived. His unique skill was literally a player's lifeline, and now it was being made public. He'd said her name and said that Sanhen was a player who always performed some kind of ritual, and sometimes there were players like that, so he shouldn't be shy and let her know what she was doing. She'd also kept it a secret. Julie approached Miso and asked if he was really like that. She'd replied yes, and they were obligated to protect him. It seemed like a terrible misunderstanding, but it was better this way than if the truth were revealed. If his skills became public knowledge, it would lead to big problems. In any case, he'd eat that heart of ice. That heart contained the extreme cold of an icy hell that was bent on freezing the entire world. After a while, Julie used her magic powers and shouted that he was the last one. Miso said it was a good job. Thanks to her, she got out alive. Sanhen also confirmed that it was all her doing. Julie asked if he was sure it would work. She only did it because he said that even if they piled up the corpses of those they had defeated earlier, the main boss would definitely have to eat them. He told them not to doubt it, because this boss would eat any meat. Julie now asked how he knew that. Sanhen didn't know what to say when he suddenly pointed to the side and switched Taeseok to quickly open fire. They needed to lure it. Miso realized they were ignoring her, and the guys waited like that for a while, sitting on the ground. 20 minutes passed, and Sanhen said that the monster could peck at any minute. Sanhen realized that this creature was here. He shouted for everyone to be ready, and grinning, turned his gaze to the monster. The system reported that it was the final boss, an ice grizzly. It was true that thanks to Sanhen's plan, they were able to easily handle everything, but there was one thing. The monster was incredibly huge, and despite everything, this situation was probably too dangerous. A few minutes earlier, the guys were discussing, and Miso asked what he meant, Sanhen. He replied that that was exactly what he said. He wanted to be bait. Sanhen replied that there was no other way. If they wanted to clear everything quickly and safely, this was the best option. All giant monsters have something in common. They all react the same way when their health is depleted and enter what are called consuming states. In this state, monsters become physically stronger and much more violent. They develop a tendency to devour everything around them, so they must pile up corpses as bait. Then, what if they do something with the bait? With this thought in mind, while Julie was carrying the corpses through the portal along with the bait, they didn't prepare juniper wood, which is a powerful anesthetic. But the problem is, they also need to wind it up to the point of devouring. They must create the necessary conditions so that they can all attack without fear. And there is his role in all of this. Only this time they must trust him, and he will arrange everything. He was one step away from death. When he was thrown aside by the monster, he realized that he was much more experienced now, didn't he? Blood began to pour from his mouth, and he realized that he thought he could withstand some blows, but this turned out to be untrue. Why was this monster so strong? Weren't his strength stat points enough? If he continued like this, he could really die. From now on, he would only dodge. Numerous explosions and impacts occurred in front of him, causing rocks to break and fly away from his opponent's force. Sanhen constantly moved from place to place and realized the monster was too fast. Was the bag a bad idea? Right in front of him was the open mouth of a monster roaring loudly, when suddenly several arrows were aimed at it. The arrows did nothing to stop the monsters, but Miso tried to help him and shouted, "Now!" Sanhen smiled and thought, Miso, thanks to her, he survived. He swung his sword and struck the monster with incredible force. The system reported a full charge. He struck with such force that the monster's back froze, and the system reported that the grizzly bear would be frozen for 1 second due to the full charge effect. Sanhen smiled at how it worked. The freezing skill he gained from the icy heart combined with the full charge earlier. He thought it would fail due to skill resistance, but it worked. In that case, now would be his time. He struck the bear with a sharp blade right in the belly, and it began to scream loudly. The system reported that the Demon Strike skill, level 2, had been activated. Miso exclaimed to Taeseok, who replied that he knew everything and would create the biggest one. He spread his magical powers and shouted at Sanhen to get out of there immediately. He was frightened and, turning around, realized his situation. The system reported the Flamingo of Blue Fire skill, which Taeseok used to strike the monster directly, destroying it. The firepower is beyond expectations, but certainly on par with its level. They must have reached the desired point in the health indicator. The energy around the grizzly bear is changing. Sanhen realized it was working, and they had inflicted enough damage. The grizzly bear entered a devouring state and everything was going well. Miso called him by name, and the system reported that the grizzly bear was beginning to devour everything around it. Sanhen was right next to the monster and was frightened. Was the devouring state supposed to be so severe? Where had the bear he just fought gone? Now it was Julie's turn. Could he hold out until then? Is this really what devouring looks like? Miso exclaimed, Taeseok, what about Julie? He called her by name and said she was still preparing. At that moment, Julie spread her magical power as far as possible, and Miso asked, will she make it in time? He said that now was not the time to think about that. The main question was whether Sanhen could hold out. He tried to run away from the monster as quickly as possible, but he understood that Julie was not ready yet. In that case, screw it. He'll die here. At that moment, he was incredibly scared when he saw the monster right next to him and shouted that the time had come and he cannot dodge this attack, so he will attack head-on. The system reported that he was using a psychedelic skill, and at that moment, Julie's power spread everywhere, and she declared herself ready and initiated deformation. Sanhen drew his sword, but Julie had spread her powers so strongly that now Sanhen was in this portal and she was still alive. The guys ran to Julie, who fell to her knees and asked if she was okay. She replied that everything was fine. She just used up too much mana. Sanhen realized that it was too close, and if he hadn't struck just now, they both would have been devoured. The system reported that a large grizzly bear was being heavily anesthetized by the suspicious juniper of the snowy mountain. Sanhen laughed and realized that since it worked, they had succeeded. Julie was dizzy, but everything was fine, and the guys hugged her with joy. When the monster reappeared near them, a lot of blood was flowing from it. This blood was spurting from the monster's wounds, and the system announced that it was congratulating them. They defeated the final boss, a large grizzly bear. After this notification, the monster fell to the ground with a crash, and they frequented the unidentified gates of frozen hell. Miso noted that Sanhen was being very diligent. They were relying on him too much. He chuckled and said, "Not at all." He insisted on it himself. They would return many levels for the reward for clearing it. They had been sweating in this dungeon, and there were many dangerous moments. Julie noted that everyone had worked hard and apologized for not being able to clean up. Miso remarked that she had done well too, and Sanhen thanked them for believing in his plan. Julie said that thanks to this, she had figured out the limitations of her abilities, so everything was fine. Sanhen chuckled and said that he'd be counting on it next time. Frankly, he was truly grateful to these guys for trusting him, but even if they hadn't listened to him, he would have still gone all the way. The gates he'd encountered in his past life always ended tragically. The average survival rate for the enemies he sought out because of the good rewards was 90%. Since the raid was conducted with non-professionals, the survival rate was quite high. He thought back to his past with sadness and realized that someone would still be in that 10%. Who makes it into that 10% is unpredictable. Players constantly face death. Growth is important, but even more important is preventing unnecessary casualties. The reward they'd worked so hard for appeared right in front of them, and they decided to see what awaited them. The system announced that a special reward for completing a first-time challenge had appeared. Sanhen was delighted that he could finally get a first-time reward for the first time. The system said they would be rewarded as soon as they touched the reward. The protagonist extended his hand when the goddess of fortune suddenly announced that he would now be able to observe and her true power. He asked again, her true power? With such a mood, he was even more curious about what awaited him. The system announced that he had been rewarded with a unique artifact and could take one from the list. Sanhen realized it was unique. He expected something cool, but it wasn't unique. Perhaps because it was the fourth highest rank, he was stunned, and the system announced that, thanks to the power of the goddess of fortune, artifacts of a unique or higher level would definitely receive their hidden skill, which would be unlocked and absorbed. Sanhen was stunned and realized he had forgotten. This clause was definitely in the contract. The goddess of fortune asked him to call her big sister Nuna. It seemed his comrades were busy choosing their rewards. They probably didn't notice anything. Was he really choosing this? Sanhen decided not to be modest and chose the two-handed sword of fighting spirit. He had dreamed of this artifact for a long time. The system reported that this two-handed sword, symbolizing the warrior's fighting spirit, possessed not only immense strength, but also increased skill with the hidden blessing of the wind, crafted by the god of fighting spirit, and the blessing of the wind of regeneration by 10%. He realized that unique artifacts were always the most powerful, and their stats were insane, right? From now on, he was counting on this artifact. When he grabbed it, it suddenly dropped to the ground and shattered into pieces. He was surprised by how heavy it was and wondered where the lightning effect was. The system informed him that thanks to the ability to devour artifacts, the mod consumption for existing skills was reduced, and as a penalty, the lightning effect would be halved, making all equipment feel as if it weighed 100 grams. He looked at the message questioningly and wondered, was this an insurance policy? And since when had this offer appeared? Miso approached him and asked, "What's wrong?" He replied that everything was fine. It seemed like everyone got something cool. The guys were standing with new artifacts, and Miso said that they got artifacts suitable for their class, and it was all thanks to him. Sanhen replied that he hadn't done anything special, and Miso noted that he was being modest again. The undeniable fact was that it was all thanks to him, so they discussed it and decided to give him all their rewards like the boss's corpse and magic stones. Sanhen was dumbfounded and asked again, "What? But they really shouldn't do that." Julie exclaimed, "No, they need to clearly understand things like this, and they counted everyone's contribution, so he shouldn't worry." Sanhen clutched his head and looked down. He couldn't believe his comrades had thought of such a thing. Just one part is worth 600 million, and if you add the byproducts, it comes to 1.5 billion. It's true, he can't hold back his laughter. The guys found themselves outside the gates of the icy hell after a while, and Miso asked, "Can he see?" "It's shameful, but it can't be helped." He suggested leaving the after party for next time. He was about to check the results. Miso waved and said they'd see each other later. The protagonist thanked them for their work, and they said goodbye. But when Miso turned around, she asked if it would be okay if she started speaking more informally from now on. Sanhen was stunned and realized he couldn't answer. How dare she speak informally to her elders? He said she could do it. She smiled and replied, "Then have a safe return home, my dear friend." She waved shyly and Sanhen froze, then smiled and said the same to her. He hadn't heard anyone address him like that in a long time. Julie and Taesuk also didn't expect this turn of events and became embarrassed. After that, he went to the back alley behind the gate to a secluded place. He absorbed a great sword, and the lightweight effect was activated. He said that as expected, since there were no bonus stats to it, there was nothing much to absorb. It turned into his favorite spicy tuna kimbap, so he was not complaining. Since everything is settled, it's time to summarize. His strength increased by 150 points, and agility by 50. The skill Counterblast uses 27 mana to knock down an enemy. Success and distance to the target depend on their ability to resist. This can use up to 183 mana, which increases the success rate and distance to the target. Clever Hunter is a C-rank title. This restores 1 point of health every time the player defeats a small and not very large monster. He smiled contentedly. Reading the results of his labors, just switching to a greatsword significantly increased his strength. Plus 2 more titles and a skill, this gate was a real treasure trove. He decided to increase his luck stat, and the system informed him that the number of points had exceeded 200. The highest point was recalculated, now the maximum was 600%. He was very happy, so he could be 6 times luckier than an ordinary lucky person. He had come this far much faster than in his past life. He reached level 50 in just 2 weeks, while it took Yoon Daekyung a year. He confidently clenched his fist and exclaimed that he would only grow. Soon he would catch up with Do Kyung-soo. A rift appeared behind him, and the system warned him that the atmosphere around him was becoming increasingly ominous. He turned around and smiled nervously, noting that it reminded him of something. 3 constellations came to him. The Lion King is seriously interested in his swordsmanship skills. The owner of Beauty and Flame praises him for his fighting spirit. The Dark Reaper questions his presence in this world, saying that he doesn't belong there. The Goddess of Fortune says that several good constellations have appeared this time, and that Sangyeon is growing rapidly. He was very surprised. He didn't expect the next batch of constellations to appear so soon. It's probably because his experience is also growing rapidly. The main reason is that the Goddess of Fortune is very popular. She gave him a thumbs up, and he told her not to pretend that she was reading his mind. Or did she really read it? He pulled himself together and turned his gaze to the one who came first. The Lion King and the possessor of Beauty and Flame, there's no one who doesn't know these two. They were real people, and then they were added to the constellation Cabal. They came because they saw potential in him as a warrior, but he's not really interested in a contract with heroes like these two. They both frowned, and the system informed him that the Lion King was scolding him for looking askance at his superiors. The owner of Beauty and Flame shouted that if this had happened in the days when he was still a general, he would have torn his head off long ago. He laughed nervously, asking for their forgiveness, and thought that this is why there was so much trouble with former heroes. He hadn't even signed a contract with them, and they were scolding him, and someone very dangerous showed up. A Dark Reaper. This is the last character you want to encounter as a player. She constantly monitors the spatial lanes in real time and wanders the surrounding area. She tracks players who receive additional bonuses due to glitches in the matrix. He heard that she is a bounty hunter who follows players who commit serious rule violations. There was such an incident in his past life. Except for special cases, such as a contract with the Goddess of Fortune, there was a player who signed 2 contracts at once. She mercilessly tormented him until he finally broke. It was terrifying. He became nervous. He didn't need either of them, even though the Lion King increases stamina and the owner of Beauty and Flames increases strength. Of course, contracts with constellations are important, but this decision changes the player's entire future destiny. However, at this stage, the Goddess of Fortune is sufficient, which means that if he waits a little longer, he will meet someone even more powerful. A divine place. Only a few players in history have made a contract with one of them, a truly mythical creature. He doesn't like the risk, but there is no other choice. He apologized to them, saying that he will not change the constellation for now. They are all indignant. The Lion King is offended. He says that he has never been treated like this before. The owner of Beauty and Flames said that perhaps he will visit him 3 times, as a sworn brother. They headed back to the rift, and he thought that even if they returned twice more, his answer would not change. He turned his gaze to the Dark Reaper. She hesitated before leaving, turned to him and warned him that one day she would reveal his secret. Finally, they left, and he frowned, thinking that all of this had tired him out. He so wanted to avoid a quarrel, but it seemed that it was impossible to avoid it. From now on, he needed to be more careful with the constellations. He took out his phone and thought that now should be a good time. If he left now, he would not be late. The monsters that would appear in the next rift were a group of kobolds. Just like the Cerberus they had met earlier, they were affected by the Hour of the Dog and the Wolf effect. He could not pass up such easy prey. He prepared his sword and thought that 3 approaches in one day would be quite difficult, but he would try, and he would try until the divine place became interested in him. Sometime later, in the quest area, the Players Association, the Rift Bureau, a call came in, a worker answered, and was very surprised when they told her everything. She immediately turned to the large screens, saying that this couldn't be true. Someone shouted that a rift had formed at the first exit of Bupyeong Station. Everyone be on alert, full mobilization. She told the woman who called her that they had just confirmed it, and would send the nearest players to the site. She said that someone was already fighting here, and she asked in surprise, "Is that true?" The woman said there was already one player here, killing monsters all alone. The girl asked them to leave, because it was dangerous, and she, watching how the player easily dealt with monsters right at the exit of the rift, said that it wasn't particularly dangerous. The rift between reality formed 11 years ago after the first rift. Unlike dungeons or gates, this was an unexpected catastrophe that allowed monsters to infiltrate their world. However, this wasn't a surprise for MC, so he greeted all the monsters with a confident smile. 10 minutes later, he left the station and thought that it was about to happen. He looked around and saw sparks nearby, that very spot. The rift started from here. He remembers it so clearly for a specific reason. The rift was a real tragedy. Many civilians died. But this time he is here, so it will not happen again. It is good that he returned to the past. Since birth, he grew up in an orphanage, so he does not remember what his parents look like. He was not sad about this, but he knows how sad it is to lose someone. No one is forgotten, and nothing is forgotten. He remembered that hero and prepared for battle with a smile, thinking that the goal is more important than becoming stronger. Monsters came out of the rift. They were kobolds. The time of dog and wolf effect immediately activated. The monsters were scared, and he, noticing this, was glad that everything was working. But it still doesn't show the same level of results as when he used it on the Cerberus. It's probably because of the moon. The moon is completely invisible, so they can't completely obey him. But this is even better. He rushed to attack and shouted that this was his chance to test out new skills. The active skill Full Charge is a movement skill. It concentrates a large amount of energy and releases it in one go, directing the charge at a target in front of the player. As the charging time increases, the damage done and the distance to the target will increase significantly. However, during this time, all movement will be limited. The energy flew right in front of the kobold's neck. He smirked, since nothing happened, but then he saw the gathering clot of energy and was scared. An explosion rang out. It's a hidden skill called Counter Explosion. He swung his sword. The monsters were thrown away from him and straight into the kobolds emerging from the rift, and he noticed with surprise that Counter Explosion has a large area of effect. A full charge increases damage, which should be enough for his attack. Plus, his luck increases his critical strike rate. A true critical strike rate ranges from 120% to 600. But despite this, the monsters managed to get back on their feet, and he noted that they were still alive, meaning they couldn't be killed in one blow. He pounced on the monsters with a smile and raised his sword over his head, saying that maybe the 2 of them would be enough. They panicked and fled, and he decided to try to inflict maximum damage. Meanwhile, a car pulled up to the scene. They stopped near the civilians, and Lee Hun, a B-rank plus player at level 110, jumped out of the car and excitedly exclaimed that they were from the Players Association. Who called? The woman said it was her call. There were monsters there. He told them all to go to a safe place, and his colleague Lee Jong, also a B-rank player at level 90, called out to him and said that they should deal with this first. They looked at the rift. Right now, a player was fighting a huge kobold. Lee Hun, quickly putting on his gear, said that they should deal with it, and his colleague drew his weapon. But Sanyeon told them not to approach. He was fine. He could handle it himself. He received the title Face to Face. He is currently isolated with the kobold. There are no allies within 5 meters of the target except him, so all abilities are increased by 20%. The psychedelic skill was activated, strength is restored, and speed is increased. The kobold swung his weapon in rage, and MC rushed at him with a wide grin on his face, deciding to see what would happen to him with such skills. He dealt the monster a crushing blow that sent him flying several meters, and he hit the rift, causing him to scream loudly. Then the energy threw him aside, and he fell at Sanyeon's feet, shocking the association workers. They asked him if he was Shin Sanyeon. He confirmed it and asked if they were both from the association. Hyun said that thanks to him, there were no casualties. For the rift, it's a miracle. They were so grateful to him. He laughed and said there was no need for thanks. It's good that he was just walking nearby. The man asked if it was just his guess, but he wasn't planning to enter the rift, was he? He was surprised and asked how he knew that. He told him that all high-level players do this. Let him take them with him, if this request is not too bold. Jong called out to him, showing that he was against this idea, and the man said that they will not bother him, he just wants to see what is there. After listening to him, MC smirked and headed to the rift, agreeing to this, and then thought that these newbies are so charming. What is wrong with him suddenly? He speaks just like an old man. They went into the rift. Sanyeon quickly broke through ahead, and the association workers ran right behind him. He dealt with another monster and Jong, catching his breath, asked why he was so fast. He is very low level. Hyun told him to forget about levels and just run. He didn't see this fight outside the rift or something. He probably has excellent combat sense or something. They will observe and study him as much as possible. He asked if it was strange that he had such stamina after that battle. Lee Hyun realized he was right. He had previously been confident that he had the highest stamina among all the players. This fight had just been truly difficult. 30 minutes earlier, as soon as they entered the rift, they found themselves trapped by kobolds. They were already meeting them with guns aimed. Seeing the archers on the second floor, MC immediately covered himself with the monster's body and told the association workers to hide behind it. He had been dragging this body all this time precisely for this purpose. After that, the kobolds opened fire. The monster's body protected them from the shots, but one of them was still wounded, albeit slightly. Noticing this, Sang-yeon realized that bringing them along was a mistake. He needed to deal with the monsters and also keep an eye on them. And then he realized that he was complaining again. He needed to learn to cope with such situations, otherwise he would never reach high ranks. He took the weapon and threw it right at the archer on the second floor, which scared the others, and then he approached them and told them not to get distracted. He used his skill, dealt with the monsters nearby in one hit, and said with a smile that they reached the second floor. At the same moment, another kobold pounced on him from the side. He hit it with his shield, throwing it away from himself. And he thought, did it come out of nowhere? It's good that he managed to react. If he hesitated, he would have been flattened. This is a champion kobold. He didn't think that someone so strong would guard the second floor. The monster put its shield forward and ran at him. MC's eyes widened in fear, and he darted to the side, thinking, will he hit it with a charged attack again? Will he be able to reflect it with a backfire? He immediately threw that thought aside. He shouldn't take risks in an uncertain situation. Then this means that he will have to reduce the overall damage dealt while preventing his attack. He lunged forward, his sword piercing the shield and reaching the monster's head, instantly slicing it off. Sang-yeon himself was surprised by such damage. The shield wasn't enough to stop it, but he managed to defeat even a kobold champion known for his high defense. However, he doesn't think he has yet managed to gain the necessary stats. In that case, maybe this is the true power of the great sword of fighting spirit. Seeing the kobold champion's head rolling on the floor, his kin were frightened, and MC laughed, saying that he understood everything. They were very scared, and then he suddenly rushed towards them, and everyone heard a crash on the second floor. Finally, the monsters were finished, and as a reward for killing them, Sang-yeon received the platinum artifact, Steppers. This is a pair of boots that convey the killer's desire to be fast, contains the blessing of the spirit of the earth, allowing the wearer to move 3 times faster in undeveloped areas. In all other situations, the wearer will gain speed twice as fast as usual. He noticed that he got it just in time. Since kobolds are more selective than goblins, he heard that they have rarer artifacts. He tried on the boots and noticed that they fit well. This will make things much easier for him. He approached the fence, glanced at the association workers who had just finished fighting, and noticed that they fought much better than he expected. Now they were running, and he thought this raid would be easier. 5 silver, 4 gold, and 1 platinum. Moreover, defeating the kobold restored his health. He really likes the effects of the new title. Clever Hunter is a C-rank title. Every time he defeats a monster, large or small, he restores 1 point of stamina. Suddenly his eyes widened. He saw a terrifying aura coming from behind the doors ahead, and immediately ran there, finding himself in a spacious hall. And he was very surprised because it was a treasury, completely stuffed with gold. He ran to the gold coins and exclaimed that he was wrong to say that he had a bad feeling. What is this? He will never have to work again? What does he need growth and goals for? With this, he will do whatever he wants. The gold absorbed him so much that he did not notice how a crossbowman snuck up behind him, and when he shot at him, he quickly dodged and appeared behind him, asking, "Was that a sneak attack?" The monster growled in response, and he swung his sword, noticing that it had the same behavior pattern, and he was already getting tired of it. But to his surprise, the monster dodged his blow, and he thought, was he able to do this at this rank? This is something new. It was as if all these kobolds were deliberately distracting him from him. It was the final boss. The monster turned towards him mid-flight and took aim. MC became nervous, but was able to quickly dodge with a skill before the arrow pierced him. He glanced at the arrow and thought it was close. If he hadn't dodged with a full charge, he would have definitely been pierced. They both landed, and Sang-yeon smirked and thought he was going to have a hard time dealing with this idiot. Meanwhile, the monster pulled out a new arrow and growled menacingly. The two had just run up to the treasury. They were surprised that the battle had already begun and apologized to Sang-yeon for being so late, but a loud and ominous scream made them freeze. Due to the Kobold King's royal gaze effect, they were intimidated. Lee-hyun screamed in fear and wondered, what is this? His body couldn't move. At that moment, MC pounced on the monster and asked with a smirk, Did it dare pay attention to anyone but him? Thanks to his recovery skill, he cancelled the intimidation, surprising the monster, and then struck, slicing its arm. But the demon's strike didn't work due to the enemy's resistance. He thought he almost managed to resist the intimidation thanks to recovery, but the difference in stats prevented him from inflicting a stun. He glanced at the association workers and thought that if the intimidation effect worked this way on 2 level 10 players, then this boss was much stronger than the goblin boss he had already fought. He smirked and rushed into battle, thinking that he hadn't succeeded last time. Unfortunately, but this time he would definitely receive the intimidation effect. The monster pulled out numerous arrows from its back, and MC realized it was attacking him. The system warned him that the Kobold King was using indiscriminate barrage fire, and a multitude of arrows immediately rained down on him. He began to swing his sword rapidly, parrying every blow, and with a smirk called him an idiot, and then the kobold rose into the air and prepared his arrows again. Sanyan knew he was smart. He was completely different from the other monsters he had fought. But does he have an infinite supply of arrows or something? That's unfair. He keeps his distance and tries to turn this into a long fight because he is fully charged. From what he remembers, his intimidation effect ends faster than its recovery, and if he figures this out, he might die, unable to do anything due to fear. He can't turn this into a long fight. If only he had a ranged attack, it would be much easier for him. He glanced at the pile of gold, and a good idea occurred to him. Meanwhile, the two finally came to their senses, and Zhang asked his colleague, "Is he okay?" He told him that he was fine, but he had never encountered this status effect before, so he hesitated. They looked at Sanyan, who was continuing the fight, and Zhang asked why he was fine. Did he have some kind of skill to cancel the status effect? His colleague said that looking at all this, he wouldn't be surprised if he had even 2 such skills. But he had some kind of strange, uneasy feeling. And then he noticed that the arrows were piercing the floor deeper and deeper, and nervously thought that he should have guessed about this earlier. He called out to Sanyan and warned him that it was a trap, but he didn't pay attention to his words, and as soon as his feet touched the floor, the monster smirked and immediately shot him with a crossbow, and the arrow pierced his body. After that, the monster landed not far from him and laughed. But the MC was just waiting for that. He said that this was so ridiculous. He thought he was the only one here who could perform magic. The arrow hit the spot he'd chosen when receiving the sacrifice effect, resetting the attack and restoring his health. He told the monster that it should have noticed when he'd let himself be hit so easily, then used the psychedelic skill and pounced on it, exclaiming that it was his turn to take the hits. The backfire effect activated, and gold coins flew at high speed toward the kobold and pierced its body, surprising the association workers. The gold coins hit it like a shotgun blast. Just how powerful was this backfire? Li Yun grinned nervously and said that wasn't the point. He'd encountered countless players, but none of them had the same sense of battle. After finishing his attack, Sang Yun headed toward the monster and, noticing that it was still standing, remarked that it was quite persistent. But he was only happy about it, preparing for a new attack and offering to finish it. He lunged forward, intending to pierce him with his huge sword, but MC was more agile and dodged, then got very close and delivered the fatal blow. The system congratulated him on killing the boss. His level was increased, and he received the C-rank title, Until the Drink Gets Cold. The title is based on the memories of the owner of Beauty and Flame. For 2 hours after arriving in the dungeon, he and all players are immune to intimidation. The system informed him that the owner of Beauty and Flame says that in his youth, he used to cut off the heads of enemies until his drink got cold. He said with a smile that this is the first time he has received the title of the constellation he met, and finally, the reward. The intimidation effect is now his. He received the Amulet of Despair, a platinum artifact with an intimidation effect. He received another pair of boots of speed and an explorer's necklace, a golden artifact with a special detection effect. The Kobold King, who needed to identify enemy forces, created this necklace to recognize killing intent. It visualizes enemies within a 100-meter radius as red lights. He just looks at it, and his mouth is already watering with anticipation. At first, he decided to collect everything and then absorb it so that no one would see, and suddenly Li Hun called out to him loudly, and he turned around, asking what was going on. The association workers ran up to him, saying that they needed to leave here right now. The rift was starting to close. He breathed a sigh of relief because he thought something serious had happened and wondered why they were so worried. Everyone knows that the rift closes as soon as it is cleared. And then he finally realized that this meant he wouldn't be able to take all the gold and jewelry from here. The guys grabbed him and dragged him toward the exit, and he screamed in despair, asking them to wait and collect everything. Meanwhile, reporters had already gathered outside the rift. Seeing the silhouette in the portal, people rejoiced and said that it seemed like they had all become more frequent since the rift was already starting to close. The smiles disappeared from their faces when they saw the expression on Sun Yun's face. He was almost crying. While he was not questioning why he was so dejected, reporter Park Jongmin handed Sun Yun a microphone and asked him to say a few words as the hero who saved Bupyeong Station. He stared at him in bewilderment and asked, Was he the one calling him a hero? Meanwhile, in the player city, Terry was currently in the advanced training hall. Cho Yi-hyun, a level 120 summoner, summoned 3 B-rank golems for her. As soon as she announced the start of the battle simulation, the golems pounced on Terry, but she was not the least bit afraid. She immediately responded to the attack with rapid slashes of her dagger, causing the golem to crumble into pieces, and then moved on to the other one. Spinning the dagger, she grabbed it more comfortably and lunged forward, delivering multiple quick and precise strikes, dealing with all the monsters at once. The stones crashed to the floor, and she turned to them and thought, is this a limitation of training mode? They are too slow. She came here so as not to forget the feeling of today, but she wants to fight him again. She should have at least exchanged contact information with him, but Miso interfered. A screen with breaking news appeared in front of her. A rift formed at Bupyeong Station today. Luckily, one player was able to clear it alone, and they were able to interview him. When she saw Sunyeon's face on the screen, she was very surprised. The reporter asked what it was like to be a player who could clear a rift on his own without any help. He awkwardly replied that he was just doing what he had to do, and he remarked on how humble he was. Terry smiled, saying that she didn't expect to see him again under such circumstances, and the reporter asked what the enemy was like. According to the Players Association, monsters in rifts can reach level 150. His level was still low compared to that, so it must have been extremely difficult for him to fight him. He replied that level was an important factor, but he believed that level didn't determine victory or defeat. The girl thought he was right. Since he spoke so confidently, it meant he objectively assessed his own skills. She had long noticed that he exuded maturity, like a player who had been through hell. Who could have been his mentor? His constellation could have been the god of war, or he could have made a contract with a divine place like her. The next day, at Sunyeon's house, he laid out all the artifacts he had obtained in front of him and began to absorb them. He entered a state of unconsciousness and smiled because it was finally time to eat. Sorting through the artifacts he'd received yesterday, he found that each one was useful, probably thanks to his luck stat. If this continued, he'd grow up to be exactly how he wanted to be. Ever since the age of players began, most top players only looked like armored musclemen. Swordsmen couldn't escape the stereotypical influence of strength or endurance. But when monsters with different attack patterns began to appear, those who sought only brute force were destroyed. So, swordsmen gradually began to lose ground, or so it seemed. But with the appearance of the sword demon, Do Kyung-soo, the paradigm of swordsmen changed. He discarded heavy armor to maximize maneuverability, traded his lack of defense for agility, and adopted all useful skills, not just offensive ones. In other words, he was a swordsman who was prepared for any situation. He essentially became a pioneer of the jack-of-all-trades style, but his pride prevented him from changing his style in his past life, so this life will be different. The system informed him that the absorption was being prepared, and very soon mushroom soup and kobold steak with black pepper appeared in front of him. At the sight of such delicious food, his mouth began to water, and he wondered if this was what the king of the kobolds himself ate. He was not only smart, but also a gourmet, but why were there only 2 dishes? He was very unlucky with the third dish. It turned out to be a salad of fresh swamp maggots, and he immediately took back his words about being a gourmet. Meanwhile, a crowd of reporters had gathered in front of his house. They all wanted to get inside and ask him a few questions, but security wouldn't let them, which caused them to start arguing. Looking out the window, MC wondered what they were doing there. And how did they end up here last time? Anyway, they pay a lot of money to avoid situations like this. He went out for some air because he wasn't feeling well, but this sight made him feel even worse. These paparazzi were going too far. He decided to try to rest inside and return to the room, thinking that he still didn't have a plan. He didn't know what to do next. Maybe he should take a day off? The weakness from yesterday still hadn't gone away. His phone beeped. An association employee, Kim Ji-hye, from the player management department, called him and said that they met in the quest area. Did he remember her? He told her that he remembered her perfectly well. But why did she call him? She told him that it was nothing serious. She just wanted to let him know that a nameplate was waiting for him as a reward for clearing the rift. Ever since all this talk about him being a hero or being given a nameplate started, he's been very embarrassed, since by his standards, these are insignificant achievements. Because, compared to the players who will soon prevent the future crisis, the rift he cleared is just a drop in the ocean, and he doesn't deserve this reward. He told her he refused, and she asked him to at least accept the priority access to the dungeon he requested earlier. She mentioned a dungeon called the Silent Lands. This of course intrigued him, and he asked, "So the decision is positive?" She confirmed it. Thanks to his feat, the higher-ups granted him permission without hesitation. The Silent Lands is a dungeon where almost all known monsters use the silent status effect, and his friend had mentioned it too. That day, he glanced at the guy sitting next to him and asked, "Is he looking at his sister's photo again?" He replied that it was just a habit. He always looked at her when something was ending. It had been 10 years since he lost her. He asked which dungeon she was trying to clear. He replied that she had gone to the Silent Lands. She was the type of player who relied heavily on skill, so when the crisis happened, she couldn't do anything. And now he could clear that dungeon without any problems. But unfortunately, They couldn't change anything, unless their strength was enough to return to the past. Sanyeon was fired up with the idea of saving her, and asked the association worker to prepare everything. As soon as everything was ready, he set off in a new car to the meeting place. He enjoyed the ride. With a new car, even driving takes on a new feel. He wanted to spend money on artifacts if possible, but the trip to Bupyeong Station to the Rift showed him what was more important now. He didn't want this kind of attention. He would never use public transportation again. He received a call. It was Jihye. She said she was calling to say there would be a raid on the Silent Lands today. He told her he was already on his way, and she added that another member of the company would accompany him there because it was no longer her jurisdiction. He smiled and thought that time really was flying by. He was focused only on training to see his progress, and it had already been a week since he cleared the rift. He laughed, saying that he was looking forward to trying out the new skill, and then he saw that there was an obstacle on the road ahead. A traffic jam had formed because part of the road was closed, and he thought, what the hell is this? There shouldn't be any traffic now. He had deliberately left during rush hour. He began to grumble discontentedly like an old man, because now the journey would take him forever. What even happened? Did another rift open? He saw a portal in the fenced area, and a gathering of reporters huddled around one person, Do Kyung-soo. The MC was very surprised to see him. Kyung-soo's fans were screaming about how much they loved him, and one of the reporters told him that he was still insanely popular. How does it feel to be loved by so many people? He coldly told her that it was an honor. She smiled awkwardly and wondered what kind of dry answer this was. Had his popularity gone to his head? She asked what he thought about the approaching raid. What was his strategy? He told her that the strategy was the same as always: exterminate monsters. She was shocked by his short answer, but she was a woman after all, and his laconicism was even attractive to her. The cameraman told her to come to her senses. Then he noticed Sangyeon's head peeking out from the car, and immediately excitedly informed everyone around him. Meanwhile, he swallowed nervously and realized that he had been distracted while looking at him, and now he had been noticed. After all, he too was now recognized on the streets. Some of the reporters immediately rushed to Sangyeon, saying that right now, an unexpected meeting of two legends was happening. Sangyeon had every chance of displacing Do Kyung-soo. His assistant told him that he was the one who had been frequenting the rift alone. He heard that his sword style was very similar to his. Kyung-soo smiled and said that he knew it. Meanwhile, the reporters crowded around the MC and began to bombard him with questions. Why was he here? Did he come to challenge Kyung-soo? He confusedly began to deny everything. Then they asked him about his new car, why he changed it, how much it cost, to which he replied that it was just an accident. He did not listen to the reporters' questions at all and looked only at Kyung-soo, thinking that this was not how he wanted to draw attention to himself. How can he fix the situation? But seeing him looking at him with a smirk, he was very surprised and wondered what it was. He doesn't know what kind of laugh it was, but he's glad he noticed it. Looking at him like that, he understands how much he still has to learn. Kyung-soo, meanwhile, turned to the portal and said that they had to go, after which he thought with a smile that he had already met enough promising players. But this one was special. He doesn't look at him with admiration, but as someone who should be surpassed. He is sure they will meet again. After that, Sangyeon went straight to the Silent Lands. He got out of the car and thought that Kyung-soo was really something. He just stood there, and yet he didn't see any loopholes. But the harder it is to get the reward, the more valuable it is. Let him wait, and then he will see how he catches up with him. An indignant voice of a girl was heard from the side. She exclaimed, "What does she mean? Today was their turn to storm the Silent Lands. Why was Sangyeon going there and not them?" He approached them and asked if there was a problem. An association worker greeted him, and a disgruntled girl exclaimed that he was just in time. He had gone too far by taking advantage of his sudden popularity. All players, without exception, must adhere to basic rules of decency. MC knew her face well and thought, thank goodness it was today. He wasn't sure, since memories become blurry with time, but it was the day his sister would die. He would never have thought that she could have such a bold, wild personality. She was the complete opposite of him. He must have had a hard time with her, but there's no point holding back in a situation like this. Sometimes you have to be firm with people. While she was indignant, he asked, so what? Even if she was offended, she shouldn't take it out on him. He was only following the orders of the Players' Association. What was he guilty of? His words left her confused, and he waved his hand at the association worker and said that he was heading straight to the dungeon, and then the girl indignantly called out to him and told him to stop. He thinks she will ignore this? He better be on his guard. Let him get the keys in advance when returning home. Her comrades began to hold her in place, because if they let her go, she would definitely hit him. Meanwhile, he thought that he should have just taken a day off. He was already starting to get irritated. As soon as he entered the Silent Lands, the smell of rot hit his nose. But this was expected, because most of the monsters here are undead. As soon as he took another step, someone's hands emerged from the ground, and then the disfigured monster itself appeared. He grabbed its leg. The system informed him that the silence effect was applied to him due to the ghoul's attack. He cannot use skills for 0.5 seconds. He immediately took out his sword and wondered if he had been noticed as soon as he entered. He adjusted his grip on the sword and then thrust the tip into the monster. but then the other ghouls emerged from the ground and immediately pounced on him. He thought, so basically, the key here is to avoid getting hit and limit the use of skills. It sounds like it's all about fundamental principles. If there's one thing he's confident in, it's this. He greeted the monsters with a smile, and the battle began. Meanwhile, the 4th scouting team of the Players Association started a meeting and decided to discuss Sanyeon. The man asked, "Is this the popular guy who met with Kyungsu today?" He was quite impressive. He heard it had only been a month since he awakened and worked in the supply team. The team captain, An asked, "So this is the one those two brothers Lee Chong and Lee Hyun were praising?" His deputy, Shin Min-jae, confirmed this and said that he has been attracting everyone's attention lately. Ikun noted that it is obvious that his rapid growth rate is unparalleled among other players. However, should his case be considered particularly special? With players like Kim Miso, Shin Tae-ri, and Do Kyung-soo, he doubts it. His deputy agreed with him. There are always players with exceptional growth rates. The way he handled the recent rift on his own also deserves high praise. However, without being able to determine how dangerous the situation actually was, they should be cautious when talking about his achievements. Perhaps he is simply skillfully manipulating the media. Lee Gahui, also from the scouting team, said she didn't think that was the case, which greatly angered him. And other team members noted that she had already contradicted the deputy captain 100 times. Moreover, she interrupted his thoughts before he could even say anything. He irritably ordered them all to be silent, after which the team captain asked Gahui to share her thoughts with them. She stood up, apologizing to Min-jae for interrupting him. But he is a player she is personally monitoring. She has been gathering information about him for the past few days, and it took some time to find out everything, but she recommends that they do the same. Only then will they be able to understand that he is not an ordinary player at all. As they themselves know, an ordinary player develops gradually. They set the parameters for level 50, assuming that Sanyeon has reached that level. Now he is developing at an incredible speed compared to an ordinary player. While an ordinary level 50 player supposedly has 2 skills and 2 titles, he has 11 skills and 7 titles. They were very surprised, and Min-jae said that this is impossible. What is she planning to do? Has she lost the ability to determine the skill level of the player she was assigned to check? Let her not forget her role as a scout. They can look at the number of skills, but are there any thoughts that come to mind when looking at the number of titles? And she says that it matches the growth rate of the sword demon Do Kyung-soo. She told him that this is the conclusion she came to after an objective assessment of the data. There is no refutation. She talked to all of Sanyeon's former dungeon partners. She asked Daekyung first. The first question, does he have any oddities? He thought about it and answered her that he thinks he has too many oddities. Gahui said that she would appreciate it if he remembered his skills, combat sense, and battlefield presence. He laughed and said that his skills are simply exceptional. He has never seen a stun used like that before. But if that were the only thing, he would not be exceptional. The reason why he is so special is most likely because of his natural combat sense. Question number 2. What can he say about his combat sense? Juhee and Taesok answered this question, both exclaiming with delight that his basic skills are incredibly cool. Gahui smiled awkwardly and said that she would like to write it down exactly like that, but needed more information. Do they mean to say that he is incredible compared to other players of a similar level? The girl exclaimed that that was not true at all. If that was the only thing, they would not be standing here. Taesok said that it was difficult for him to explain, but what sets him apart from the rest is how well trained he is. It was as if he was fighting side by side with a veteran with years under his belt. Gahui asked him to elaborate, and he said that he felt like he already knew what was coming. His intuition about what the enemy will do next is simply amazing. Also, most people have moments of weakness. Gahui agreed with him. If they didn't have enough experience to mitigate this, 1 or 2 wounds would appear. Taesok said that Sanyeon was completely different. His body moved on its own, as if he hadn't even had time to think. Right now, MC was fighting ghouls, confirming everything he said. As soon as he saw an enemy attack, he instinctively dodged and attacked back. Gahui asked, in other words, did he have excellent combat sense? Taesok said she'd hit the nail on the head. He had a highly trained combat sense. No matter what situation Sanyeon found himself in, he immediately found a way out. Gahui concluded that Sanyeon's defining characteristic was his instinct, which rivaled foresight. Furthermore, his combat sense could rival that of A-rank players. If they factored this into their analysis, she believed it was enough to consider him an S-rank player. Meanwhile, the MC dealt with all the ghouls around and sighed heavily, wondering if they were serious. There are too many stupid monsters here. At this time, Min-jae was already boiling with rage. He jumped up from his chair and exclaimed, "Does she even understand what it means to be an S-rank player?" She answered him that she understood it perfectly well, and he exclaimed, "What kind of foresight? She means that Sanyeon already knew that the rift would open, and that's how he managed to earn himself the title? Maybe she will also say that he just went back in time?" She noted that it was quite an interesting theory. She knew that their vice-captain was smart. He shouted her name in irritation, and Ikun told everyone to shut up. Why do they argue at every meeting like children? He understood why she thought Sanyeon was not an ordinary player. From now on, he was under her personal supervision. Minjae objected, and he told her that she would be alone. Does she understand everything? She smiled happily, telling him that she would do everything in her power. Meanwhile, MC continued to conquer the Silent Lands. He covered his nose with his hand and thought that he hated the smell of monster blood. But the smell of ghouls was even worse. They just appear out of nowhere, and they are quite difficult to deal with, and they don't drop any artifacts. And then an idea occurred to him. He had a new skill. He should have used it from the very beginning. He used the detection skill and saw all the enemies in the area as red silhouettes, hiding wherever they could. He smiled nervously because there were so many of them, and he thought he had already dealt with half. He saw a red flying dot nearby. It turned out to be a fly. He extended his finger to the insect and thought, does this also count as a monster? As soon as he touched the fly, an explosion occurred, which he clearly did not expect. Luckily, he reacted in time to avoid being burned, and if he had slowed down, he would have lost an arm. If there were even flies like that here, then there was most likely a magic-type monster somewhere nearby. If he didn't get rid of them, things would be bad. These flies flew at him from all directions. Several explosions occurred, and the mages watching from the top of the building rejoiced. They were the ones who summoned these flies. Minjae, meanwhile, turned to Gahui and said that he understood that she thought highly of Sangyeon, but besides his combat sense, did he receive any ratings for any of his skills or titles? According to the analysis, it seems that he has unique means to acquire most of them. She said that she had thought about this herself. It was just her hypothesis, but if there was a small chance that she was right, then he was a player beyond compare. At this time, the mages were surprised. Their flies had blown up everything in the area, but not Sangyeon, thanks to his defensive sword skill. Sangyeon asked them to leave him alone. Now it was his turn. A few days ago, he was practicing deflecting arrows with his sword. It had been about 3 days since he started doing this. Except for special cases like devouring artifacts like he did, the way to acquire a skill is quite simple. Constant training. According to widely known guides, acquiring basic passive skills is relatively easy, but acquiring special skills like full charge, such methods won't work because it requires constant training in special conditions. Players who discover these methods keep them secret to give themselves a unique identity, so they are almost impossible to obtain, unless by chance. Still, he was a very experienced player, and that's why he withstood the explosion just now. The mages were frightened, panicking, and creating even more flies, and Sangyeon rushed towards the massive swarm. The protective sword he'd worked so hard to obtain was definitely a good defensive skill, but its major drawback was the inability to move forward. However, any limitation could always be circumvented. Several more explosions occurred, but Sangyeon leaped out of the fire, leaving a trail of smoke behind him, and approached the monsters under the effect of his defensive skill. They panicked and prepared an inferno spell, then hurled bright green fireballs at him. Sangyeon grinned, shouting that it was too late. He swung his sword, dispatching them in one blow, while the middle boss of the Silent Lands sensed their death. A purple mana crystal dropped from the mages. Sangyeon picked it up and thought that a high-ranking mana crystal was worth about 100 million won, and high-level dungeons also gave high-ranking rewards. He returned it to its place, deciding to take it after he cleared the entire dungeon. Now it was time to head into the thick of things. He used his detection skill and found out that there was only one monster in the area, which surprised him greatly, because there had been many of them just recently. So, where was this one monster? The monster was right behind him. He felt it and was scared, but it was too late to react. Would it strike from the left, from the right, or from below? He cursed out of nerves, because whatever it was, he needed to predict the direction of the attack instinctively. He prayed that he was right and jumped, and the dead man struck, and the wall he was standing on crumbled. Looking at the rubble, Sangyeon whispered in shock that this was madness. Now he understood, of course. The monsters didn't just disappear. They all hid because this guy came out. The monster that indiscriminately exterminates players and other monsters is a Death Knight. The knight pounced on him, and he thought he didn't know why a monster that should be deep in the dungeon suddenly appeared out of nowhere. But when he met it face to face, he now understood that it was he who killed his partner's younger sister. He is a Death Knight of wrath and repentance. Sangyeon swung his sword, vowing in this life to prevent her death, and with a cry, he struck. The destructive force roared. The knight was strong, and Sangyeon found it difficult to control his sword. He cursed and thought that each of his blows was too heavy. A Death Knight, as the name suggests, is a Walking Dead type of monster, a knight born of death itself, or rather, he is the soul of a swordsman trapped within a restless body. His signature technique is the constantly active Swamp of Silence, a skill that silences anyone who touches the black aura at his feet. The association assumed he could be defeated, with an A-rank player using a ghoul dungeon monster as a standard, and they simply raised the difficulty of the Silent Land dungeon to level 120. This was the association's biggest mistake. A Death Knight's true power isn't the Swamp of Silence, but the spirit of the swordsman residing within them. In other words, if that swordsman was exceptionally powerful, a a Death Knight becomes exponentially more dangerous. The association realized this too late and later adjusted the danger level of the Silent Land. It was later revealed that the Death Knight was an A-level or even S-level danger. In the end, Sanyeon couldn't withstand his blow. He was thrown back and hit his back on the stone floor, and then a scream and a spray of blood came out of his mouth. He realized that this was dangerous, and this time for real. He could die. The Death Knight walked towards him. The pain subsided, and he exhaled heavily, saying that this made him so angry. Leaning on his sword, he stood up and said that every time he said he would die, it was too difficult. People really don't change that easily. Every time it gets dangerous, weak thoughts always appear first. From that point of view, he hadn't changed at all. He called out to the knight and asked why he was staring at him. Let him come to him. The Death Knight remained silent, and his grin was visible through the cracks in his helmet. He pointed his sword at him, and he jumped down to the floor below, after which the monster followed him. He grinned, glad he'd followed him. It would be reckless to fight him with his current health. He needed to boost it somehow. Using detection, he spotted ghouls nearby, and that's where he was heading. While the Death Knight was gone, they moved toward the center to avoid combat. A barred door stood in his way. He kicked it down, drawing their attention with a loud screech, and the monsters immediately rushed to attack. He focused and delivered several sweeping blows, all the while moving forward. He killed all the monsters, just as the Death Knight arrived, and he restored his health with the help of his title. He smiled and thought that he was much faster thanks to the artifact he'd received in the rift, making it much easier for him to throw off whoever was chasing him. He needed to keep regenerating like this and head to the deepest part of the dungeon. Continuing to hack down everyone in his path, he finally reached the deepest part of the dungeon, and what he saw there slightly surprised him. The entire hall was filled with a huge crowd of ghouls. He smirked and wondered if there were still that many of them. In that case, they would help him fully recover his health. He was about to begin, but the Death Knight caught up with him faster than he expected. Hearing the clanking of armor behind him, he cursed and then jumped, dodging the knight's blow, which cut down all the ghouls that were near them. Landing, Sanyeon cursed loudly, because this attack wasn't meant for him. The Death Knight did this on purpose. He realized he was regenerating health and killed his allies. He jumped again, dodging the blow, then raised his sword over his head, and the system warned him that the Death Knight was preparing a counterattack. He didn't care. He recovered and found an opportunity to attack. He wanted to attack him with the counterattack skill, but he couldn't. It was blocked. He fell under the influence of the Death Knight's Slough of Silence. All his skills were deactivated. He realized he was mistaken and let out a frightened sigh, and then the Death Knight delivered a powerful blow that slammed him into the wall. His health dropped to minimum, and he thought that it was a stupid mistake. He told himself 1,000 times that he would not fall for this. All the health he had restored was gone. He would have died if he hadn't blocked the blow with his sword. He became nervous, remembered his fallen comrades, and realized that he couldn't leave like this. When his partner was dying in his arms, he asked him to promise him only one thing: let him bury him next to his sister. Sanyeon told him not to say that. He will not die. They were almost finished. The rescue team would arrive soon. His friends smiled and asked, "Is this true?" He quietly said his name and he exclaimed, "That's true, so don't let him pass out." But it was too late. His friend's gaze went blank, and he screamed loudly in despair. The Death Knight stood still and waited, and when his opponent's voice rang out, he tensed. Sanyeon said that he had thought about it so wrongly. It was his fault for trying to conserve his health until the final round. He was wrong, and he wouldn't repeat his mistakes. So this was a fight to the death. The psychedelic skill activated, and he charged toward his opponent, thinking that he couldn't end here. Not because he was attached to his goal or the past, but because he couldn't leave what he had to protect. They both suddenly disappeared at the same time. Then their blades clashed, and they began to move quickly across the hall, parrying each other's blows. Sanyeon thought that just one scratch would be enough to peel the skin off his palm. He wouldn't be able to take him by force, but now he understood. He saw that he was better than him. The Death Knight struck again. This time he didn't parry but jumped behind him, and the knight immediately turned around, but he was no longer there. Sanyeon was behind him again and pounced on him, shouting that his attacks were nothing if he couldn't parry them. He struck. The critical strike effect triggered. He applied more force, and his opponent was thrown back. His critical strike probability was 600%. The knight was slammed into the wall, fell and no longer moved, and Sanyeon spat out blood and told him not to be dramatic and get up. He knew they wouldn't end that easily. The blow caused the knight to lose his helmet, and now his head was ablaze with blue flames. The system reported that the Death Knight was using the flames of his past life as a sacrifice. All of the Death Knight's physical stats were increased. Sanyeon prepared himself and thought, has it already begun? Each Death Knight has a different skill level, but they all have one thing in common. When their health drops below 10%, the usual pattern of a deadly game of tag begins. The system warned him that the Death Knight would self-destruct in 10 seconds. The monster spread its arms wide and screamed loudly, and the flames engulfed it completely and began to blaze. Sanyeon thought that with its current health, even one hit could be fatal. In this situation, all he can do is become a complete victim. But he can't just let himself be devoured. Even prey struggles before death. With 10 seconds left, he will run like it's his last. He leaped forward and reached his opponent in a split second, dodging his furious blow, leaving blazing claw marks on the floor. He gritted his teeth nervously, his strength already waning. He ran, and the monster followed him and used magic. He noticed this and cursed. The Death Knight pulled his sword towards him, wanting to attack, but Sanyeon didn't let him and threw his sword at him, knocking the weapon out of his hands. There were 7 seconds left. The knight hesitated, but didn't go back for his weapon, and continued the chase. He waved his arms, hoping to hit Sanyeon, but he was lucky. There were 6 seconds left. Blood spurted from his mouth, and he thought that this was stupid. There was still plenty of time left, and his body was already howling in pain, as if his lungs were being torn apart. There was still a little more time. His body had to hold out. He turned around, saw the knight attacking, and jumped to the side, avoiding the explosion. His body gave way. He couldn't land and fell on his shoulder, causing another flash of pain. With 4 seconds remaining, he glanced at the Death Knight. He was already very close, and he wanted to use the skill, but the system notified him that he was under the influence of the Death Knight's effect, the Swamp of Silence. All effects were deactivated. He racked his brain, trying to find a way out of this situation. If he didn't come up with something, he would die. The knight's hand was very close, and he remembered his youth, how he killed ghouls. Cutting the last one with his sword, he joyfully exclaimed that he had finally killed those stinking ghouls. His friend ran up to him and asked, "Is it over?" He confirmed it and indignantly asked why he looked completely fine. He laughed and said that it wasn't that hard, and he became indignant, asking, was he the only one fighting here? They kept using silence, which means it's not that hard. They used their skills, but he couldn't use his. Is that fair? It's like telling a swordmaster like him not to draw his sword. His friend said that's why he told him to bring the guild-issued unusual stat recovery artifact. He also told him not to be stubborn. He exclaimed in response that he wasn't stubborn. What's the point of carrying an artifact that has a 2-hour cooldown? And if they use silence again, it will become completely useless. The guy said that's exactly why he should use it wisely. Even if it's unfair, he can still use it once and try his luck, right? Doing the best based on the situation you're in is what makes a good player. He looked at it in surprise, then grabbed it and asked, was he even thinking of teaching it? If everything were always that easy, he would have entered the top 10 by now. He indignantly asked why he was reacting like that. He had stated the obvious. He exclaimed in response, maybe he wanted him to hit him so obviously? Returning from his memories, he laughed and said that it was too early for him to lecture anyone either. He used the recovery skill, canceled the silence effect, and used the step back skill to quickly increase the distance from the enemy. He was thrown into the air. The Death Knight struck, and seeing that he dodged, he screamed in despair. With 2 seconds left, Sanyeon grabbed the chandelier and hung there, after which he hissed through clenched teeth that he was quite a nasty opponent. His last mana was spent on that step back. He had nothing left to play with. He couldn't do anything else. The Death Knight rushed towards him, waiting for him to get close. Sanyeon let go of the chandelier and fell down. With 1 second left, he landed awkwardly, hitting his back, and realized that he didn't have the strength to even move a finger. How much time was left? The Death Knight appeared right in front of him. He was terrified and cursed, then wondered if this was really the last thing he would see before he died. And at what point did everything go wrong? It was mistake after mistake. He underestimated the enemy's strength from the very beginning and suffered enormous damage in vain. Even after that, he continued to make the same mistakes, but he did not give up until the very end. He had to live this life better. The knight's sharp claws almost reached his face. He already thought he was finished, but time ran out and he began to self-destruct. He froze in midair. His hand began to crumble into sparks, as did his entire body. Sanyeon laughed hysterically, having already mentally buried himself. He felt like his third life had just begun. His body completely disappeared, and the system congratulated him on defeating the monster. He received a huge amount of experience previously unavailable. His level increased significantly, and his health was fully restored. He smiled nervously, realizing he'd completely forgotten about it. Full health restoration after leveling up saved him, but health and stamina are different things. His health was restored, but his stamina wasn't, and the cooldown from the psychedelic was still active. He could move forward, gaining cooldowns, but the final boss of the Silent Lands was even harder to defeat. As if there was anyone more difficult than a Death Knight, but it was impossible to continue like this. There was only one way out for him now: endure the cooldown now and restore his stamina faster. He hadn't landed any significant hits anyway, so maybe the cooldown would be shorter. He deactivated the skill, and a sharp pain instantly struck his body. He fell and screamed in agony. The system informed him that by canceling the psychedelic, he would enter a state of complete exhaustion from all the accumulated damage. Warning: accumulated damage has exceeded the threshold. The exhaustion level is increasing. Warning: prolonged extreme exhaustion can lead to the death of the player. He wondered why they hadn't warned him about this before. His eyes began to roll back in his head, and his consciousness faded. Meanwhile, they continued to wait for him at the entrance. Since so much time had passed, the association worker remarked that everything was strange. According to the association's preliminary analysis, He should have cleared the dungeon and returned by now. The players looked worriedly at their leader and asked if something had really happened there. Should they go report it? She irritably said that he had been completely confident when he entered, so let him bear the responsibility now. They said their conscience still bothered them, and she nervously clenched her teeth, then exclaimed that he was irritating her again. What on earth was going on there?